G'day mate, 40 here. So I'm back on Manly Beach. I just can't resist the cheap public transportation prices here in Sydney. So I've been all around Sydney and I'm spending on average 67 cents a day, like $1 Australian. For $1 Australian, I'm riding light rail to Circular Quay, the Sydney Opera House in the Central Business District of Sydney. And then I'm getting on the ferry to Manly, riding the ferry to Manly, which I used to think was like $8, $10, $12, $15 Australian. Well, somehow I'm only spending $1 Australian, 67 cents American, like all day, all day transportation needs. I could just ride on the Sydney ferry through Sydney Harbour like all day. It's such a joy. So, very windy day today. So we'll see how the wind affects the sound quality. You can tell me if the sound quality is just too bad. But been traveling around Sydney, listening to Dr. Mark Shapiro, who's a professor of Jewish thought at a Jesuit university, and here he is talking about woke culture. He's not very happy about woke culture.
Something, I'll tell you what annoys me, and I know some people will disagree with me, but I'm going to show you what annoys me very much, because I take you, when you come on the trips, I take you to great places, and I show you great things. In fact, those who will be with me in Italy, we're going to be entering the venue.
So tell me about the sound quality, because tremendous amount of wind, and I won't persist if the sound quality is too bad. But let's get some Uncle Mark Shapiro here. So anyway, the point about Mark Shapiro is his father is Edward Shapiro, an historian of Jews in America. And Edward Shapiro went to school in Washington, D.C. with Werner Wolf. Remember Werner Wolf, the sportscaster? He used to do the morning show on CBS back in the 1980s with Diane Sawyer. And his catchphrase was, "Let's go to the videotape." So, okay, so far the sound is fine. So Werner Wolf went to school with Mark Shapiro's dad, Edward Shapiro.
The Venice ghetto in 2 weeks, and right as you enter the ghetto, right on the side, you have the actual declaration from the day the ghetto was established, almost 500 years ago, in which it states that the Jews, no one's allowed in here, and the Jews are not allowed to leave, and they have to be here at night, and non-Jews are not allowed to enter, whatever. I forget the exact last show. When you come.
So the whole idea of a ghetto for Jews, right, sounds absolutely horrible from a 21st century perspective. But, I mean, is not Orthodox Judaism a form of a Torah ghetto? I mean, I'm sure there are traditional Jews who believe that Hashem gave the Jews the Torah written and oral so that they may be fenced in and protect the gentle goyim of creation, because the Jews would be fenced in by all the restrictions of the Torah written and oral. Also, better to live in a ghetto than to get slaughtered outside the ghetto, or to have a dramatic increase in social tension, resentment, hatred, fear of Jews. So if living in a ghetto made it easier for non-Jews to accept the presence of Jews in their midst, then at that time and place, I can think of a lot worse options.
You come with me to Vienna, smack in the middle of the main square, right at the top there, you have a terrible anti-Semitic thing, and all throughout Europe you see these things. And these are important, I think, to see, to show. People today don't read them, they don't pay attention to them. Who can read the Latin going into the Venice ghetto, what it says about the Jews? But when you lead a tour, this is what you want to see, and this is important stuff. And you have in Germany, on a number of churches, you have, many of the churches have, not many, a few of the churches have this, here, hold on, find you something and show you something here, because you might have heard of the,
So anyway, how are you feeling about the magnificent Dallas Cowboys victory today? 40-3 of the Minnesota Vikings. This is the biggest road victory in Dallas Cowboys history. And so I'm feeling good. The Cowboys now 7-3, looking strong to make the playoffs. And it helps me to get over the pain of yesterday's 48-45 USC victory over UCLA. I'm a Bruin, went to UCLA back in the 1980s to study economics. And I'm walking around Manly, right, on Sydney's North Shore, like checking in with my phone on every play. What a heartbreaking loss. DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the UCLA quarterback, threw 3 interceptions and lost a fumble. So 4 turnovers thanks to DTR. Right, he was driving for what would have been the winning touchdown against USC, and in the last minute throws an interception. And I was just thinking about that. Like, I was very intensely into the game, but I get no social reinforcement, right, in Sydney for my sporting allegiances. So without social reinforcement, your allegiances tend to wane, whether it's to Judaism, to sports, to your culture, whatever it is that's important to you. If you're not getting social reinforcement from other people, right, your passions and commitments are going to attenuate, right? They're going to get weaker, right? We need other people. We need community to build up a feeling of connection. So one of the great things about sports is a connection with other people. What's the national team? Bloody hell, this wind. But without people to bond with, all right, there's no shared sense of creating a common reality, and no shared, unity and synchronicity with other people, and no bond. Does your passion for sports ball impede your spiritual progress? Well, it can. I'll have to leave it to you to judge whether or not it's impeding my spiritual progress. Like, I like to start the day out with about an hour of 12-step work, on the phone with sponsees, on a meeting, listening to a talk. But after that, I feel free to explore my sports ball interests. So the World Cup has already started. So 6 a.m. tomorrow, America plays its first game in the World Cup of soccer. And then Wednesday morning at 6 a.m., Australia plays France in its first game. So part of me wants to go to a sports bar. So I was asking about, what are the best sports bars around here, so I can have that shared communal experience, that shared sense of excitement and emotional energy that comes from participating in an event together. But found out at the sports bars, like a glass of seltzer costs $12, right? Whether it's a glass of beer, glass of seltzer, a glass of Coke, it's $12. So maybe I'll just stay home and I'll watch the sports ball, but I'll watch it with the sound off so I can listen to a 12-step lecture, so I can be spiritually edified on the one hand, while indulging my base physical inclinations, simultaneously. I mean, I think this is the best solution. Like, sports ball for the eyes, 12-step talk for the soul. Right? I mean, you're hitting on all cylinders. And yeah, why do guys love sports? And I think the reason why guys love sports is it's a simulation of war. And guys are just naturally built to be prepared to go into war. Like, you feel the need to build up. I'm betting on all European teams because of their superior endurance. You've been reading a lot of Steve Saylor. So I think it's natural for men to want to band together to defend your in-group or to make war on an out-group. And so banding together for war, preparing for war, or having substitution rituals for war, I think is the most natural, normal male thing. And so the excitement and thrill of sports is it is a vicarious way of waging war, which is just totally, part of male nature. And I think every man knows you have to be prepared to either take a life or to sacrifice your life. I mean, that's what it means to be a man. You have to be prepared to stand up for some things. You have to be prepared to fight and defend people. You have to be prepared to, make the ultimate sacrifice of your life for the people, community, things that you believe in. And so by watching some sports ball, we get to reenact those rituals, prepare for sports ball turning into real war. HBD for fun and profit. So Elliot Blatt, have you wagered some money? So what team are you wagering on to win the World Cup? I think maybe this year Australia will do it. Is this the year that the Aussies fair dinkum take the World Cup?
Share my screen again. The Ecclesia and Synagogue. So this is the big one in Strasbourg, the famous one. Although now it's in a museum and it's replaced by replicas. But you have at various churches.
So I definitely can't bet on sports ball. Like, that's a form of excitement. It's just too potent for me. I went crazy betting on sports ball. And one guy took me to the cleaners. Somehow he knew about horse racing, and I ended up owing him thousands of dollars in high school and just settled with him for like 200 because there was one point where he owed me over 1,000. Allowed him to settle for pennies on the dollar. Germany, hello people. Okay. All right, this is Dr. Mark Shapiro, scholar of modern Jewish thought.
Churches, you have examples of this. So you have on the left the church standing triumphant, on the right the synagogue, blindfolded because the Jews are blinded to the truth, and she's, I guess, looks a little wanton, usually it's described. And this is important, and I don't think anyone today going into a church looks at that and is influenced by this, but it's important. Now you have the Jew sow. This is another common image of the Jews suckling on a pig, because of course we don't eat pig. And you have this in woodcuts, and here you have it in Wittenberg, which is Martin Luther's church. As a historian, this is the sort of thing which really brings to life what, for hundreds of years, people walking into a church saw and how it turned them against the Jews. Now, of course, today in a place in Germany, no one's going to church. In all of Europe, they don't go to church anymore. But, and no one who's anti-Semitic is being anti-Semitic because of an image of, which I don't even know what it means anymore, and it's on the top, shame on the full rush. But this is important historically. So then you have, I didn't call a cover, in my opinion, to the top German court, because you have, in the era of cancel culture, you have where is it, the description of, you have this Jewish individual who's been suing for years. I think it's described here. The plaintiff, since 2018, to have the sculpture removed. Just like they removed Confederate statues, to remove this sculpture.
Yeah, so I blame that Schmendrick, that schmuck, who's going around suing churches and public institutions for maintaining this artwork. But I also blame the legal system for allowing it. Like, how did we end the culture for encouraging this kind of sense of victimization and outrage and wanting to activate cancel culture? So individuals don't act in a vacuum, right? I'm a UCLA Bruins fan, but the longer I spend in Australia, the weaker my attachment to the UCLA Bruins because I'm getting no social reinforcement. How much cottaging is going on in Manly? This is a wholesome, manly place. All right, there's no cottaging going on in Manly. Right, this is not Beverly Hills, man. This is not San Francisco. This is not New York City. There's no cottaging going on here. Right, I'm panning around. Do you see any cottaging going on? No cottaging. This is a cottaging-free zone.
Sculpture, because it's anti-Semitic. It shouldn't be on now. Now, despite the fact that the Jewish community, as it says here, created a site of remembrance, incorporating the sculpture. I don't know what to say. What can I say? It annoys me to no end that some Jewish person wants to remove the historical evidence of the anti-Semitism of Martin Luther in his own church. And it's not only a violation against history, it's a violation against, we should know the history of anti-Semitism, and it hurts my tours, because when I go to these places, I want to be able to point to it, and I don't want to, otherwise, who knows, they'll destroy it, they'll send it to a museum. It's like what they did with all the statues in America. No one knows where they are, they put them away somewhere, and I don't like it. And it annoys me. It's a do-gooder, and I don't like these do-gooders, because, and no one's going to the church anyway, believe me. They don't go to churches anymore. So what can I say? If they ever took them down, I'd be very, very annoyed. But in terms of tours, since a number of you asked, I would just briefly share something with you, and I do want to make a correction. I spoke a lot about Europe. I took my son. It was a nice trip, and I'm just going to show you a couple pictures here. You might recall when I told you a number of times how the women don't go. I spent Shabbos again there. The women don't go to shul, and that's true. I did not.
Yeah, so all this tearing down of statues is just crazy. Like, destroying remembrances of our history is insane. Someone should mount a march in Virginia or Charlottesville to protest the tearing down of these Civil War statues. It's a shanda. All right, here you can find strong support from the Torah for the preservation of history. We shouldn't treat history so casually.
On Shabbos. I asked people, they say no women go to shows on Shabbos. But I also told you that one of the rabbis who said, what do women have to do with shul? He told me that almost none will show up on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur either. But I was told differently. I was told this time that most do go to shul. So someone even said 90% he thinks go to shul on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Obviously not this rabbi.
So traditionally, Orthodox women didn't go to synagogue, but in Anglo countries, it's more common that women go to synagogue. But if you're single or you're looking to mingle, meet an Orthodox Jewish woman, you're not so likely to meet one at synagogue, right? So going to synagogue is more of an obligation on the men than on the women. Oops. Trying to get everything queued up here.
So, and a number of them go to hear shofar, and but that's the only time. Also, that in Purim. In fact, let me show you something. I even was in one of the new shows. Well, not new show, newer show, but they even built an Ezra's Nashi. Here it is. About 15 years ago, he showed me. So you see that even in Jerba, there's been some changes going on. But just briefly, here's some of the pictures I shown. I think you might find interesting. The children, you got to be there on Shabbos to see hundreds of children. But I was interested also in the yeshivas. There's a couple of yeshivas. So here's a picture in one of the yeshivas. Look at all these young kids. By the way, they don't wear tzitzis, most of them. As I told you, they don't. And I asked one of the rabbin when I was there. He said it's very hot, so I get it. But there's no expectation that to wear tzitzis. But here's some other pictures I took. Here you see a little kid, he does tzitzis there. There's what it. In the yeshiva here, it's only Kodesh, no limudei chol. There is another school where they can go and they can get some. They learn math and some science for like an hour a day. But some kids don't go. They just learn all Torah every day, except for I think Yom Kippur and I guess Tisha B'av. But they're there on Shabbos. I went on Shabbos. They go to after shul. They go back to yeshiva every single day, 12 months a year. No chofesh like we're used to. I'll show you some other things that I took. Here's another picture.
Come on.
That gown is because the guy's wearing shorts. You can't wear shorts in yeshiva.
This is the June 20th, 2022
they don't feel they need
Lecture Fair lecture.
That's the Rebbe.
The Rise of
These guys
Reform
are all learning.
and the Rabbinic Response.
I'll show you one or two more pictures here.
Come on, get past the pictures. It's harder for me to fast forward on my iPhone.
They don't divide it by grades. They divide it by levels of learning. And interestingly enough, they publicize, I don't know if I told you this ever, they publicize once or twice a year all the grades of all the students. I have a pamphlet I have which has all the grades for each class.
Yeah, a lot of Jewish schools do this. They publicize everybody's grades.
That'll never happen in America because it's a violation of privacy. But there, they feel that if, you got a 60 or something in Gemara or in Halacha, that's going to embarrass you and you'll do better. So I asked, how could you do this? And they said, we're all family, so it's okay. So here's another Rebbe, and I even have, I think, a video of...
I think this is Spain.
They review the Parsha, here it is, each week in with the Trump. Yeah, I took a picture of that video. Let's see. So by the time they're older, they know the whole Torah by heart with the Trump. When you go into the shul, you have to wear a gown. If you don't have... if you have shorts. So, for example, this is my son putting on his tefillin in one of the shuls. You have to wear this gown, which is strange. And there's 14 shuls in Germany, including one in the shul.
So Germany, not Spain.
All the people who go out their shops there. And the final thing I want to show you is
14 shuls in Germany total?
This is in a place called Zarzus. I also had a short sign, which is near Libya. So much so that my phone was being charged a lot of money. It wasn't on the Verizon plan because it was going through Libya, believe it or not. And but they have a whole community there, all Arabic speaking. The only place in the world where you get Arabic speaking children who are Jewish. And so you don't think it was all research and going out there. There's lots of fun. If we ever have a trip there, here I am in the Sahara. That was a lot of fun. So that's our brethren in Tunisia, in Jerba. Oh, it's very challenging, by the way, for Zionists, because although they're very big Zionists, they don't do tafnun, they do halal without a bracha on Yom HaShmot. They don't do tafnun the only place in the world the day before Yom HaShmot, and the day after Yom HaShmot. 3 days. Yet they do not want any of their children going to Israel, because when after the state was declared and many of them went, they became Masorati or irreligious, and everyone in Jerba, all 1,200, are all Shomer Shabbos, all the children, because the only culture is the Jewish culture and the Arab culture, and those will be an Arab. But if you go to Israel, half these people, you see that.
Elliot Blatt says I've been spending a lot of time listening to interviews with scammers, all right, who've gone to prison. So why are you doing that? Bro, you should stream at noon Sydney time, which is, 5%, 5 p.m. Pacific. Well, isn't that basically what I'm doing? It's just 1:52 p.m. here in Sydney right now. On a Monday.
Groups, they would just merge in with, Masorati Sfardim, but not really halachic. So, who can argue with them? It would happen. So they want all their kids to remain there, and the community's growing. It's the only Jewish community in our world that's growing, and it's, like I said, it's something to behold. Okay.
Yeah, Elliot Blatt, why are you listening to all these interviews with wicked people? Shouldn't you be listening to interviews with, holy, righteous, Gedolim, the great rabbis?
The end of that, let me go 5 more minutes. I have other things I want to get to, but I'll get to next week. I got to show you another thing. This is unbelievable. Because what I'm going to show you, I remembered it after the class. And I remember it was a big news because the professor who was concerned was a well-known Christian Bible professor. Do you remember we spoke about Rabbi Dunner of Amsterdam? He had his commentary on the Talmud where he has this unusual idea that certain passages of the Talmud were really meant to mock the rabbis, and they got incorporated. And one of the ones he gave the example was is a case where a guy who falls off the roof and hits a woman on the way down, they have sex, whatever. Now, I think this is, I don't talk to me, think the standard view, and this, of course, the correct view, is that the Talmud will sometimes get crazy cases.
Yeah, Elliot Blatt says feelings of emptiness leads to drug use, out of control drug use leads to crime. Okay, so plug this show into your emptiness and we'll forestall the descent into drug use and crime.
Not that it never could happen, but they want to get the most extreme case. When we were in Gemara when I was young, we'd ask questions. They're about the cases, and the Rav would say, kasha for myself. No, it's kasha for myself. And the Gemara sometimes would give these extreme cases. Sometimes the extreme cases that it covers anything imaginable. But there was this professor.
And like maybe the way to approach it is like.
And for years, he would give this case, this story, and he would use it to contrast, at least he claims, to contrast with Christianity. That in Christianity, if you have the intention, but you don't do it, you still get credit in Judaism. If you don't have the intention, it can still have significance. I forget the exact details. I actually think he probably was using it as an example to show the foolishness of Jewish law, that it deals with all these extreme cases. But if you can believe it, this is going back already to the 90s. It's not just something happening today. I think we only have snowflakes today.
And Elliot Blatt says, I try to understand things that seem irrational on the surface. Yeah, so do I. I think that's one of the many things that bonds us. Because I just don't like that explanation, oh, people are just stupid or people are irrational. I think if you put a little effort in, you can understand why people do what they do. Where on the surface, it seems absolutely inexplicable. Listen to this story.
This very progressive, which they call woke Christian seminary, protested that telling the story of the Talmud made her feel safe or abused or whatever. It was some nonsensical thing. And the professor was, disciplined. And she charged that by using the story of the lecture unreasonably interfere with academic performance. He was put on probation. He had to apologize. He was told to get therapy and never to be enrolled as a female student, even though he had taught this passage for many years. Now, what's interesting is in all the articles about this, in one of the articles, they got to Rav Soloveitchik. He says, Rav says the professor made an innocent statement and he quoted Talmud correctly. He says Rav Soloveitchik, a noted Talmudist and dean of First Rabbinical College of Chicago. People should stop reading their own prejudicial ideas into the Talmud. It's like what's against the Talmud. But I think this is interesting. Sexual or textual harassment. And then you have another one. Unintended sex leads to unintended fall.
Textual harassment. Have you ever suffered from textual harassment?
Professor files suit over charge of harassment. I just Googled it, and these were the three that came up because I remember it was a big case. But there's many others. Really crazy. We go 2 more minutes. In terms of Rich Shimei, I thank the person who commented on the video on YouTube, and also Avi Katz for reaching out to Rabbi Jaffe, the head of Maimonides now.
So this is a June 20th, 2022 Mark Shapiro lecture, The Rise of Reform Judaism, the Rabbinic Response. And this is just a day before the Roe v. Wade decision is handed down by the U.S. Supreme Court.
That they do not, from already in Days of the World, they do not say Rich Shimei. And anyone who wants more details on it, you find it in this book by Rabbi Benjamin Hamburger, Minhag Shoshet Minhag Ashkenaz, first volume. He has a whole discussion of Rich Shimei, how Rich Shimei this was not Ashkenaz Minhag. And you can read all about it. Other things are...
Yeah, Elliot Blatt says modern life is low effort, low enchantment. So, Elliot, what do you think about what I was listening to yesterday? It says that psychedelics can have an integrating effect, right? So it helps to give you distance, helps you to see connections between things that you would not otherwise see. I heard this on the Parrot Room on Mickey Kaus's annual weekly talk with Robert Wright. So have you experienced the integrative power of psychedelics helping you to see connections between things that you previously didn't see, helping you to get needed distance from your life and a sense of peace with your decisions?
I want to get to, but I'll do this next class, including the Rambam, and I was writing my memory and not teaching a child illness, profession, why he doesn't report it. I was also in Paris on the way back. I'll share some halachic interesting things that I saw in Paris, and I think you'll find interesting because we take for granted just the opposite, because we don't live in a place where it doesn't get the sun doesn't set until almost 10 o'clock at night. Many people, because we live, maybe at the end of class I'll get to it, they assume certain things.
Okay, the chat says psychedelics are overrated. You've done them dozens of times and you are unchanged.
Things about Jewish life because they live in time zone where...
So I know people have taken ketamine as part of an overall therapeutic regimen. So it's not just ketamine on its own, it's ketamine plus psychotherapy. So it's like liberalism. Liberalism can never survive on its own. Yeah, you get a distance from your own personal story. Yeah, often we need distance from our own stories. But I know people who've gotten benefit from a ketamine regimen. You need ketamine plus therapy, just like with liberalism, you need liberalism plus nationalism, or liberalism plus socialism. Like liberalism always demands, a plus element for it to work. So liberalism is just a set of principles. It's not really a system of governance.
Where things are relatively easy. And I also want to get to, I want to Rafal Breuer and his commentary on Shearer Shearing. I'll get to that as well. But it's already time, so I want to pick up now where we left off. Especially since I do want to wrap up to a certain extent, if I can, by next class, because then I'm going to be off for a while, for a couple months. But let us begin. If you recall, and if not, I encourage you to go to the videotape. And as Werner Wolf used to say, Werner Wolf was together with my father in school in Washington, D.C. But if you remember him from the news, you can go to the YouTube or the Torah Motion and you can listen to it. We're in the middle of dealing with Abraham Geiger.
Elliot, you don't believe in chemical shortcuts, but bro, you haven't tried modafinil. I mean, wow, modafinil just makes you happy, fills you with confidence, new sense of energy, intellectual curiosity. I mean, it's one thing to be generally against chemical shortcuts, but modafinil, bro, wow. I took some this morning, feeling great, full of confidence.
Geiger and his approach. So let me pick up just by saying that according to Geiger, and he's clear about this, in the battle between Pharisees and Sadducees.
So Abraham Geiger was a little bit like Martin Luther for Christians. So Abraham Geiger was one of the leading founding rabbis of the Reform Judaism movement.
Because everyone wants to be a Pharisee, the Orthodox. That's what they're called. Now, the Orthodox are the modern Sadducees. Just like the Sadducees died out because they couldn't change with the times, and the temple was destroyed. They were so attached to the temple they couldn't adapt, and therefore they disappeared. So too the Orthodox, the traditionalists. Now that we're in the era of emancipation and things are being welcomed into the modern state, the traditionalists live like this. They can only live in a ghetto when they control people and don't allow them to live the way they want to live. And therefore, he had no doubt that the Orthodox would not be able to.
Yeah, that's true. Whenever Jews have had a choice, they've generally, the majority of them have chosen not to be Orthodox. Right? Jews given a choice, the majority of them choose not to be Orthodox Jews.
Now you could say that, Geiger has been proven wrong. Orthodoxy has survived, and I have no doubt that if Geiger was alive today, he'd be quite surprised that there's still a vibrant Orthodox community that passes on to their children. And yet, in a sense, you can look at it the other way and ask, really, has Orthodoxy really survived in a significant sense? We take the United States, and what is the Orthodox? 12, 13.
Right, do you see yourself as a good representative of the efficacy of modafinil? Yes, I do. But maybe I suffer from misapprehensions. Maybe I'm out of touch with reality. Maybe I'm missing part of the story here.
14% of the American population is not really very successful. Now, it's true that as every year goes by, the Orthodox percentage grows, both in terms of absolute numbers and in terms of percentage. But much of that is due, obviously, it's seeking a lot of children, but in terms of percentage, really, because the larger community is just disintegrating and disappearing. So I don't know if, in retrospect, if a 15% survival rate of the Orthodox, which then will become the Jewish community to a large extent, in certain places already is the majority, like Baltimore, but maybe Geiger could say that's not such a success. But even as it may, Geiger did not even think that he could have any vibrant religious communities in modern times. And, there's a Hershey agreement with Geiger on this major point to get to that traditionalist Judaism of the sort that Geiger's referring to can answer.
So I'm logging about 10 miles a day, meaning most days I'm doing between 12 and 15 miles. But I've taken 3 days off since I've been here. 3 days off with no exercise on those days. And I'm feeling much stronger, much better than I did when I arrived. So initially 10 miles a day would absolutely wear me out. But now 10 miles, not such a big deal. I haven't been doing as much swimming as I need to. I notice when I'm out there swimming, I just get out of breath. I just can't get enough breath very quickly. So that usually takes me a couple of weeks of swimming to get into shape. And the walking doesn't translate into swimming shape.
That's going to be Hirsch's major point. And it became clear very quickly from 1800, where in a place like Germany, traditional Jews were the majority, to 1850, where they were a minority in all the big cities, happened within 2 generations. That showed, that, according to Hirsch, that the rabbinic leaders had missed the boat and were not living in accord with Torah and Derech Eretz, which means that the Torah has to confront and be a controlling factor in every civilization. If you're living in the 19th century Germany, like you're in 18th century Berlin, Warsaw, or Vilna, then there's no way Judaism can survive. So we'll see that a figure like Shlomo Raphael Hirsch is going to be the biggest adversary for a Geiger, because he shows that, contrary to what Geiger says, that traditional Judaism can survive. Both Geiger and Hirsch agree that the old form of traditional Judaism could not survive. Geiger drew one conclusion from it, that therefore we have to abandon traditionalism in its entirety, and Hirsch drew the other conclusion. And once Hirsch's method gets going, there's very little tradition. In fact, Geiger felt so threatened by Hirsch.
So you could call Abraham Geiger a founder of Reform Judaism. You could call Samson Raphael Hirsch founder of modern Orthodox Judaism, and you can call Zachariah Frankel the founder of conservative Judaism. These are all 19th century German Jewish intellectuals.
His approach. He wrote a review of the 19 letters in opposition. But what is the basis of Judaism, therefore, for Geiger? If it's not Jewish law, if you're traditional Jews, of course, it's halacha. Well, he believes that Judaism has, I guess, we call it a creative spirit. That's the important. And everything that's important to Judaism, including halacha, arose from this creative spirit. The fact that halacha doesn't speak to us anymore doesn't change the fact that it arose from the creative spirit. But for Judaism to survive, every generation needs a new creative spirit. So the idea, remember, it's not reformed Judaism. That's like, happening.
Could I obtain mushrooms in Australia if I were inclined to? Probably could. I haven't heard anyone talk about mushrooms. I haven't smelled marijuana since I've been here. Marijuana is illegal here. So haven't seen very few, drug addicts, drunks, homeless, those sad cases.
Yes, no, it's reform. It continues. It's reform. It continues to change. And although even someone like Geiger and the early reformers could never imagine what reformism became, they did recognize that moral values change. And therefore, it doesn't make sense, for instance, when years ago someone wrote an essay against the changing view of reform about homosexuality and said, what would Solomon?
Yes, absolutely magnificent Dallas Cowboys victory today. I was watching the whole thing live. KO Sports, man, it's a great streaming sports subscription here in Australia, just $28 a month, and pretty much all the live streaming sports that you need. Australia won the first two of its 3 one-day matches with England in cricket. Saturday night, the match was going on in the Sydney Cricket Ground, and when I'd hear screams around me, I'd know that Australia had taken another wicket from England. So the Sydney Cricket Ground's about 4 miles from where I'm staying. Now, I don't want to go to the Sydney Cricket Ground. It costs like $50 for a ticket. It just seems too much money. I'm not spending much money on this trip. Probably spent a total of $200 American since I've been here, maybe $250 American in my 17 days. This is day 17 of my journey down under. So I get to have a lot of spare time, a lot of freedom. In exchange, I need to restrict any needless spending of money.
Claude Montefiore say if they were alive today, because it's not important what they would have said if they, it's not important what someone 100 years ago or 75 years ago would have said. It's important if he'd actually be living today, not if he'd get him from the grave, because the attitude is that morality changes, morality changes. They progress. How far do you progress? Okay, things. Let the reformers duke that out. But Geiger puts a great deal of emphasis on this factor, the notion of the times, that religion has to listen to the outside world. It can't live in a vacuum. Judaism changes. It has to change. And that's where his scholarship is so important. Because he's not just some preacher who's preaching about how it has to change, and we have to listen to the outside world, because the outside world is like a form of revelation. There's this dialectic here. It's not that we see how things are, people looking for freedom, things like that, and that speaks to us, and we look in our tradition and we see God's word in the past, that sort of stuff. It's not like you can open up.
So you found a copy of Matt Forney's Confessions of an Online Hustler, $10 paperback edition on Amazon. I believe that you can get it for free. It's going next to my Big Ford books. I believe you can get a virtual copy of that for free. You just sign up to one of the Matt Forney email lists. So I wonder how much of that book, which I think was published 10 years ago, is still relevant and useful today. So anyway, Mark Shapiro starts to talk here about the Orthodox Jewish response to Roe v. Wade.
Open up the Torah and actually point to this verse or that verse, but it's a dialectic of what we hear. And remember, the Torah comes from the people itself. That's where it comes from someone like Geiger. But Geiger is not just some preacher, like I said. Geiger is a scholar, a great scholar. And it's going to be his understanding of ancient Jewish history, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, he's going to focus on them. That's going to enable him to legitimize reform from a traditional sense. It's going to show that he's carrying out a tradition. It's not just a break with tradition, something new. He could have said, this is reform, this is the past.
Wow, physical copies of Matt Forney's book normally going for $50 to $100. Wow. I don't think that my books are selling for that much money. Way to go, Matt.
There were reformers who said this. That this is how we used to live, but now we understand we have to live differently, and therefore it's a break, and now we want to create a new type of religion for our people. No, Tiger sees he wants to create a historical link, and he does this through his scholarship to legitimize reform, because now reform is so effective, and his views in this are seen most clearly in a book that he wrote, which is a work of scholarship, but is more than a work of scholarship. You can get it, I see, on Amazon, a reprint, and a paperback, Urschrift, und Übersetzung in der Abhängigkeit von der inneren Entwicklung des Judentums. So the original source and the translations of the Bible and its connection to the development of Judaism. So what is this book? Well, it's a study of the Targumim and Septuagint and what we can learn about.
So the Targumim are rabbinic commentaries about 2,000 years old, and he's also talking about a Greek, the Septuagint is a Greek translation of the Bible, of the Hebrew Bible.
About how Judaism developed based on this. We all know that there's Targums.
Do I believe the media is trying to protect Caroline Eliason and Sam Bankman-Fried? I certainly think so when you look at that puff piece in the New York Times. But they're also getting a lot of critical scrutiny. But yeah, I think they got so much positive press because they echoed the media's left-wing orientation. So if you echo the values that the media upholds, you're much more likely to get positive press. I mean, if they'd been right-wing and donating to VDARE, they would have gotten destroyed. Yeah, Sam Bankman-Fried. So, yeah. We have a ruling class, and they're predominantly on the left. And so there's simply a way of speaking if you generally want to get along with elites. Elites in the professions, elites in the media, elites in non-governmental organizations. All right, there's a certain left-wing way of speaking, and Sam Bankman-Fried and Caroline Eliason have mastered that. Now, I really think if only Caroline got to know me, I could make her mine. That's my brave prediction. Caroline, if you're listening to this, please reach out. I'm here for you.
Is the Aramaic translation of the Torah. Open up any Hebrews, but also you have Uncles. You have other Targums. You have Targum in Navi, you have Jonathan, Targum Jonathan, you have the Tuvim Targum, Paul Jonathan Stein, and on the Torah you have a Targum.
So these are 2,000-year-old rabbinic commentaries on the Bible.
The Targum is scholars refer to as pseudo-Jonathan, because it's called Targum Yonatan, but we know Yonatan didn't write it. In fact, the reason it's called Targum Yonatan is because originally it was tough apostrophe Yud, and the printer thought that was Yonatan, but actually it refers to Yerushalmi, Targum Yerushalmi. And there's a fragmentary Yerushalmi with another Yerushalmi, it's called Targum Yofiti.
So there are two Talmuds. There's the Babylonian Talmud, which was produced in Iraq about 1,500 to 2,000 years ago, and there's the Jerusalem Talmud, which was produced in Jerusalem. The Babylonian Talmud is the dominant one in Jewish life. It gets 100 times as much attention as the Jerusalem Talmud. Leftists are aware that their hysterical reactions to benign events such as Trump on Twitter only serve to feed their enemies. Yeah, but it doesn't just serve their enemies. They're also whipping up enthusiasm and fundraising and emotional fervor on their own side. So when you have one side of the political spectrum getting hysterical, yeah, one question to ask is, what reaction is this creating from their enemies? Another question to ask, what reaction is this creating from people who are in the middle? And then the next question to ask is, what reaction is this creating among members of your own team? So if you can fire up your base, right, and fire up the other party's base, right, then on the face of it, you're dealing with kind of an even reaction. So the main thing is, do you fire up your base more than you fire up the opposition? And that seems to be the formula for winning. You want to fire up your base more than you fire up the opposition, and you also want to increase the odds of people who are undecided moving into your camp.
That's what the name was given to celebrate the Vatican. So we have a number of Targumim. Other than Uncles, the others are more extensive, very midrashic. We have the Septuagint, which is a Greek translation of the Torah. We have Vulgate, obviously, the Latin translation. We have, in terms of ancient versions, we have Samaritan texts, and we also have testimony of ancient texts, the Talmud, Midrash, other sources. So there's a lot to work on in this regard. What Geiger's going to tell us is that there's a whole history to Judaism that, in a certain measure, we can see through these ancient texts. No one really had argued this before. to the extent that Geiger, to be speaking in terms of grand theological ideas, is true, as was.
Okay, you say today's leftism and today's leftists seem so lacking in self-awareness, it's unsustainable. Well, they're incredibly successful. So maybe because they control almost all of our major institutions, because they dominate the cultural means of production, maybe that has allowed them to become more slovenly and lazy and self-indulgent. So that's one possible answer. Another is maybe they're so dominant in today's America because they are sufficiently self-aware to be effective. I mean, it's hard to say that the center-left and the left have not been effective. They dominate most of our institutions.
We'll see. Even before Geiger, it had been argued that the scribes, the Sophrim, and even the Masoretes, we'll see about the Masoretes, the ones who punctuated the Torah, had altered the original text. We'll talk about the Sophrim. But Geiger's going to go much further because he's going to offer a complete discussion of this phenomenon. And
is the Anti-Defamation League aware that their actions actually jeopardize Jews? I don't think they are. I don't think they believe that. But the ADL used to be always on the left, but much less partisan than it's been since Jonathan Greenblatt took over. So now it's just overwhelmingly a leftist institution, and their hysterical responses to people like Kanye West and Kyrie Irving, I don't think really are doing Jews or non-Jews any favors. So there's going to be a blowback to this ADL overreach. But how severe the blowback? And they're very good at fundraising, right? And money is power. So not clear that they're completely blowing it. I certainly don't like what they're doing, but they keep raising money. They keep getting heard in important places. They seem to have tremendous institutional and personal power. They can, they met with Elon Musk. They seem to be able to meet with anyone they want.
it's going to show us that he thinks that there were.
They seem to be able to meet with anyone they want but Donald Trump. But Donald Trump doesn't seem to pay the ADL any mind.
Evolving views, theological views, religious views, and we can see the remnants of them in the various versions of the Targumim, and this affects theology, it also affects halakha. Before Geiger, most people said, well, these are mistakes, these are errors, copyist errors, translation errors. But Geiger said, no, these are not errors, these are not mistakes. These are different halakha positions, different ideologies.
Who is writing these checks to the ADL? Some of it's, old Jews who are afraid that the Cossacks are coming. A lot of it is secular Jews who don't really practice Judaism but still want some kind of purpose or meaning in their lives. So fighting bigotry and anti-Semitism kind of fills that hole, that lack of meaning in their life. So I think that's part of it. And then it's a way to, pay them off, so that you curry favor with the right people.
Theological positions that we see in the ancient texts, and of course the upshot of all this is going to be that Judaism is constantly evolving, constantly being changed, because the rabbis are the ones who put together, basically pushed out all these texts and these ideas for their own reasons, as we'll see. In fact, he says that in these early texts we see the struggle between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and as well as all sorts of other political and religious struggles. But with the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, then the Pharisees are in charge, and they were able to set the text of the Torah. They were able to remove all these other types of Judaism and create one text. So the situation reflects the Septuagint. Septuagint is the Greek translation. It's the Bible of the Greek Orthodox Church. Well, the Old Testament of the Septuagint, Geiger says, has a different halakha, which means that it was working with a different text. And Geiger thinks that what we have, our text, we call the Masoretic text, was actually altered for ideological reasons to reflect the new halakha. Namely, the Pharisees created a new halakha. Of course, Geiger's a new Pharisee, so he can also create a new halakha. That's what.
Okay, halakha means the way, or Torah law, Jewish law is halakha. So halakhic means abiding by Jewish law.
That's why this isn't just scholarship, but this is scholarship to make a point, to prove something. If you can show that the Pharisees were engaged in reforms, that is, they didn't like earlier halachot, and therefore they reformed them and came with their own halachot, and then they changed the text of the Torah to reflect their own halachot, well then Geiger is part of historical continuum, and he can do the same. In fact, he would say that the Septuagint preserves the ancient, the authentic reading. By the way, since I just thought of this as I was preparing today, the Supreme Court is going to come down with its ruling. It'll be released tomorrow or the next day. you sort of know what it's going to say. I shouldn't say that because you never know, based on belief, that Roe versus Wade is going to be overturned. And this has led the last few weeks to great disputes in the Orthodox world. I'm thinking of Torah motions in Canada, so maybe they don't feel the weight of this moment, because I'm thinking maybe you should have a class or two discussions on it. Because on the one hand, you have people like Rabbi J. David Blythe coming out like an evangelical preacher, saying that the Orthodox Jews should feel a debt of gratitude to the Catholic Church for fighting this battle that we have been on the sidelines on. And on the other hand, you have Rabbi Jeremy Weeder, the complete other side, gave a very interesting interview on Scott Kahn. He was with Brandeis with me. His podcast, The Orthodox Conundrum, in which Rabbi Jeremy Weeder very eloquently explains why it's in Orthodox Jews' interests to support Roe versus Wade, and how overturning this would be a terrible thing, and I guess to have everyone in the middle. In fact, I was shocked. There was an audio from a user of Herschel Schechter. Now, I don't think there's anyone more liberal about abortion or Herschel Schechter. He's talking about abortions in the 9th month for good reasons, and I don't get that until the answer says until the 7th month. And Schechter saying he doesn't understand it, so why you can't put it in the 9th month if it's an important reason. And he's talking about a case of a Yaakov girl running in London. She got pregnant, and it was a Yaakov girl, and they allowed her to have an abortion. But then he says into the 9th.
So in traditional Judaism, is the rabbi seen as a scholar or a mystic? A rabbi just means you passed a test. So if you're talking about a congregational rabbi, you're talking about someone who kind of ministers to the needs of the congregation, like in large part a social worker. So most Jewish congregations don't look for a rabbi who is a Torah scholar. Right? They look at someone who's going to remember their name, is amiable, friendly, uplifting person to be around, someone who can help you out, provide wisdom and guidance. CNN is calling the location controversial. Wonder why? Does someone involved say something transphobic? What location? What are you talking about there with regard to CNN? So very few congregations seek a rabbi who's a mystic. That's more of a very particular orientation. So there'll probably be 50 times as many congregations that seek a rabbi who's a Torah scholar as opposed to a mystic. And then there are probably 10 times as many congregations who seek a rabbi who provides excellent pastoral care. That's even more important than being a Torah scholar. With regard to the World Cup in Qatar, you're telling me that Qatar is not on board with the trans revolution? It's very sad to hear.
I know a lot about the issue. As long as I know, there's never been a post saying unless it's a matter of life and death for the woman, but not for these other concerns. Have an abortion in the 9th month. I was in shock to hear Schechter say it. But so I can tell you that in the Orthodox world, the views go from all the way on the right to all the way on the left, and all arguing from Torah sources. And what should be our position? So if I put my 2 cents in, I think maybe Rabbi Feldman should. It's not an issue in Canada, I think, but it's a big issue in America, and it's coming down soon. Well, we have one of the most liberal abortion laws in the world. I don't think there are no restrictions on abortion as far as I know in Canada. There was big debates. Henry Morgenthaler, those who know, was an Auschwitz survivor. He went to jail a few times because he was giving abortions when they were illegal in Canada. Now it's totally legalized. There's no law restricting it, and I'm with you. I'm very much in favor of Roe versus Wade. I'm with Jeremy Weeder. It's good for the Orthodox to have Roe versus Wade, but that's Roe versus Wade. I mean, it's 6 months. It's not like Canada, right? The 9th month or something. I don't know that there's any prohibition. There's not. You can do it into the 9th month. You can correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of Canadians are on tonight, but I think there's the Supreme Court. There was a lot of Supreme Court threw it out years ago, and Parliament has never passed an abortion law, as far as I know. And it's made a lot of research.
What do I think of anti-natalism? As put forward by David Benatar. I don't know David Benatar. I'm opposed to anti-natalism. I particularly want good, smart, successful people having children. And I want, criminally inclined types, parasitic types that have been on welfare for generations, stupid types, all right, people with massive health problems. I prefer that they don't reproduce. Is CNN only now learning of Islam's deep, abiding commitment to LGBT plus communities?
You know what they say, when America sneezes, we get your Canada, so that's the expression. Listen, when a woman's 9 months pregnant, she can give birth tomorrow when you forbid an abortion. I'm just saying. Anyway, okay, so why do I mention this? By the way, that was when somebody asked for a medical evidence, so that's what I think we're going to discuss next. We'll discuss it. Okay, I'll let you know. So why do I mention this? I mention this for one reason, because just to show you the sort of thing that Geiger was speaking about, I think I'll give an example. I'll give a few other examples, and then I was preparing the examples. I'm thinking of the questions of what Geiger speaking about in terms of how expressing this situation, where it's just an error or a mistake. His point is it's a different halacha, which has then been pushed out. And so what's the example? Well, here's the example. And it's very So in the book of...
What do I make of the anti-natalism of the book of Ecclesiastes? Well, everything occurs within a context, and so Judaism overall is so pro-natalist that to have one book of despair in your canon, not so bad, not so important. So despair is part of life, and Ecclesiastes gives voice to this very common phenomenon of despair. And I don't think many people live their lives by Ecclesiastes, but times and places, people are going to resonate with it. So I don't think that Ecclesiastes Kohelet has had a huge effect on Jews who tend to reproduce at an above average rate. Okay, apparently some of the construction workers in Qatar were illegals from Nepal. They were jailed and were not allowed to buy tickets for the World Cup. That's very sad. Very, very sad. Let me find some more highlights here from.
They need something to guide them. They need some purpose in life. If you don't have traditional religion, you need to fill it with something to give your life meaning. So there's been a lot. The universal Jewish concern is the upper straight of the Jews. Because those Jews who are everyone. But because we had this connection to God, that God spoke to us, that we felt the sense of spirituality, the sense of an existence of God, and through the use of our reason, we were able, before others, this is going to be part of the idea of the mission of ethical monotheism, to come up with important ideas that any civilized society needs. Now, there is going to be a tension here between the stress on...
So now I'm on to the June 27th Mark Shapiro lecture here, The Rise of Reform and the Rabbinic Response. So talking about largely 19th century Germany.
Reason and revelation, because although Geiger puts a stress on reason, there were many Reform leaders who actually believed in revelation of the Torah. There were plenty of Reform leaders who, in contrast to Geiger, were complete believers that the Torah was revealed in its entirety. However, they believed that...
So I see a lot of things in the news media kind of bemoaning how many construction workers died or were injured in building all these stadiums. Well, none of them are slaves. None of them were forced to go there. Like, workers went to Qatar because among all their options, this was the best option they saw for making money. So yeah, it was working in extreme heat, but it's not like they had a plethora of opportunities, or they could just work from home, producing legal documents. All right, so everything comes with a risk. Poverty comes with some pretty big life and death risks.
That within the Torah, it was also understood that the laws are not eternal. They only apply in an era like you saw when you live among idolaters and pagans. That the Torah itself doesn't wish for you to keep the ceremonial ritual law. But they believe the moral law was part of the divine revelation. So much so that Isaac Mayer Wise refused to hire Louis Ginsburg to teach in Cincinnati at the Hebrew Union College because he suspected that Louis Ginsburg wasn't adherent to the higher criticism. And Isaac Mayer Wise, the Reform leader, believed in Torah in its entirety. For Geiger, the outer core is up.
So that's interesting. Isaac Mayer Wise was one of probably the most important American Jewish Reform rabbi in the 19th century, and he wouldn't hire Louis Ginsburg because Louis Ginsburg believed in the higher criticism. So Mayer Weiss, believed in the divine origins of the Torah, and yet still was a Reformed Jew, because you can believe that God gave every single word of the Pentateuch and still hold that it's not binding upon us today. So yeah, God did this 3,200 years ago. It was appropriate for then, but times have changed. It's no longer binding. So you can still believe in the divine nature of the Pentateuch and still hold that it's not binding on us today. Do I think that the poor people in Nepal should reproduce? I don't have an opinion. How comparable is today's USA to Weimar Germany? I don't think it's very comparable at all. Yeah, my father believed in, accepted biblical criticism and the documentary hypothesis, and he would often say the Bible was perfect for its purpose, that the Bible was, a work of man inspired by God, but that the fullest divine revelation was in the person of Jesus. So Christians have Jesus, that's their divine hook. Jews don't have Jesus, so it's much more important from a Jewish perspective that you regard the Torah as divine. My father, probably a little more theologically conservative, but he was kind of center-right theologically. And there's another question there from John Smith. Did my dad believe in evolution? Yeah, he believed that God guided evolution. He didn't think that evolution was was there sufficient explanations for the glories and wonders of life, and so he'd write against evolution and speak against evolution, but perhaps privately, if you spoke to him, he would admit that there was evolution within species. I think he was much more skeptical of one species evolving into another species, but I don't think he would have had a big problem with divinely guided evolution. Ecclesiastes and Job were President Eisenhower's favorite New Testament books, but they're both in the Old Testament.
Obviously, this is what we call the ceremonial laws, and but none of this is eternal. It was valuable. It had its place, but we moved beyond it. Very different than Mendelssohn. As we saw from Mendelssohn, the ritual laws are eternal. They're binding. You can never get rid of them. For Geiger, you know what's binding? The moral law is binding. It's for in Geiger's day, everyone knew what the moral law was. As we've seen in recent years, what used to be thought to be moral, today immoral. Today.
Yeah, my father definitely did not believe that the world was 6,000 years old. He thought that was ridiculous. He accepted scientific explanations that the world was billions of years old.
Today is often regarded as not immoral, so even basic morality, we have new understandings. But for Geiger, they hadn't yet reached that point, so the moral law is binding. The ceremonial law is made by people, and it can change over time. It's based on customs and traditions. If they remain meaningful, fine. If they're not meaningful, no.
Is the anti-Christian historicism a net negative or a net positive? I don't know anything about Richard Carrier. I have no idea whether it's a net negative or net positive. I mean, I'm very much a historicist. I believe that you can only understand everything within its historical context. So everything I say do today takes place within a particular historical context. Like what's radical, one day is normal and next, and is the law at another time. So I don't think you can understand anything without understanding it in its situation. So I'm a big believer in the power of situation. Now, for some people, I guess reading Richard Carrier, it would damage their Christian faith, and so it would have probably a negative effect on their lives. So some people leave Christianity and they become better, happier, more effective people. Other people leave Christianity and they become degenerates. So some people leave Judaism, become happy, healthier, more effective, and nicer people. Other people leave Judaism and become degenerates. So it's not clear.
So now we know what's eternal and what's not eternal. And we also see that what determines what's the arbiter. It's human reason.
And John says, I think on the whole, religion does more harm than good. Stunts social progress. I think for some people in some societies, it sometimes in history does more harm than good. But given that it's virtually universal, the need for religion seems like a biological necessity. You can't live without a hero system, and religion is just one form of hero system. So, John Smith, you have a hero system. You tie yourself into something transcendent. You believe that you're aligning with the forces of history, or the forces of good, or true, or righteousness. Right? Everyone has a hero system, which is based on a substantial leap of faith. Yeah, but even as a nihilist, I'm sure that there are still things that you believe in. Right? Everyone needs a hero system. Everyone needs some way of believing that their life has meaning, and that their decisions have meaning, their actions have meaning.
It's conscience. But this doesn't mean that everything is reason. No, I would say that, remember, Judaism is a religion. It's not just some sort of Aristotelian understanding of how to live. And every generation is going to express itself in ways that are spiritual. But every generation has to find it. Every generation will find ceremonies that speak to them. So Geiger is not saying get rid of ceremonies. Rather, we find ceremonies that speak to us. And every generation will find them. But the job of the ceremonies is simply to give us religious inspiration. But they're like the kernel. They can be changed. It is true that there were some reformers, even proto-reformers, who were almost carrots, in that they wanted to get rid of the Talmud, rabbinic, they wanted to go back just to the Bible, but this is not Geiger's way. Geiger saw the Talmud as another stage in the development of Judaism. The rabbinic period is an important stage, and it's an authentic stage, but we've moved beyond it. And then Geiger speaks about how in our contemporary strivings we will listen to the voices of the ancients, and to discover the genuine Jewish spirit in the Talmud. But the point is that there's a spirit in the Bible, and a spirit in the Talmud. Every generation moves on. What is the essence?
Yeah, Elliot Blatt says, I find people without a link to the transcendent boring. So some kind of link to the transcendent seems to be almost a biological necessity. That everybody has some sort of code that they live by. Everybody subscribes to some sort of hero system to give their life transcendent meaning, whether they're religious or secular.
Judaism, if you can point to an essence for Geiger. And Geiger points to the prophets. If you want to know what the essence is, in a spiritual sense, we know, as I said, the Ten Commandments, things like that. But if you want to see how it plays out in action, look to the prophets. The prophets, for Geiger, they recognize that the rituals were secondary. And there's all sorts of psukim where the prophets speak about, the prophets say, you weren't commanded on sacrifice hard to know what they mean. But when you were commanded, the Torah is full of these commandments. So it seems to be that they're saying that these are not the essential commands, the most important commands. So for Geiger, if you look at the prophets, what do they have? They have concern for the poor, concern for the widow, concern for the orphan. The rituals and outward their usefulness, they stand in opposition to.
Okay, what is a hero system exactly? So most people are scared to death of insignificance. Most people are scared to death of the idea that their life has no meaning or purpose, and that when they're gone, it won't make any difference. So to ward off this feeling of insignificance, people subscribe to some sort of hero system. So for some people, it's science, right? The pursuit of scientific truth, whatever virtues they ascribe to science, right? That's what gives their life meaning. And so they will slave all day and all night in the service of science because that gives their life meaning. Other people get their meaning in life from their sports team. So they kind of merge their identity into that of their sports team. And their sports team serves the role of heroes and prophets and teachers and people who walk the true and the good path in life. So hero system is some sort of system that transcends yourself, and that by attaching yourself to it, you get meaning. So for a Jewish hero system, by performing the commandments of Judaism, following the dictates of Judaism, participating in Judaism, you connect yourself to like a 4,000-year-old tradition. And so you're part of something that goes, goes way back in history and will go, far forward in history. So you're not insignificant. You're part of, an eternal people that will last thousands of years forward. John says, I have found embracing the meaningless of life, particularly my life, has been a relief and not a burden psychologically. And then other people get meaning in life out of gardening, all right? They feel themselves part of nature, part of the cultivation of nature, the beautification of nature, the horticulture, right? Just absolutely absorbs them. And so by absorbing themselves into horticulture, they feel attached to something that transcends their own individual life. Other people transcend their life by belonging to a 12-step program, so helping people with a particular addiction. Right? That gives their life long-lasting meaning that goes beyond them because they've been able to help other people, and these people will help others, and so there may be a long chain of people that they've been able to help. Other people get their meaning in life from fishing, from pursuing hobbies, woodworking, creating beautiful things, and showing other people how to create beautiful things, the pursuit of beauty, and the aesthetic, right? This becomes something that transcends their own individual self and goes on down through history, and that gives their life meaning.
True spirituality, they can jettison them. Today we call this social justice. And they believed in God. They believed in the one God, obviously, and they believed in a bright future for humanity. We're moving to a better place. Geiger could point to the fact that 19th century Germany was more civilized and more advanced than medieval times. Obviously, that was the case. And the source of the ideals of the prophets is God. Because they were inspired by God to search and to come up with these ideas.
So I believe it was the intellectual Ernest Becker who talked about hero systems and how we have a need for hero systems. I think it may have been in his book, The Fear of Death. But our greatest fear with death, with regard to death, is being insignificant, Ernest Becker held. And so to ward off this feeling of insignificance, we create hero systems. Yeah, via YouTube live streams, I can be immortal. And nationalism is another way many people feel the need for significance. You attach yourself to something that's longer lasting than yourself.
So therefore, Geiger sees value in rituals if they have meaning. And he kept kosher. It might surprise you. Geiger kept kosher. Does that mean that he was not on all the things? No, but he would not eat pork, things like that. He was, because it had value. it gave spirituality to our lives. It added holiness to our lives. On the other hand, because it's up to Geiger to decide what gives spirituality, he can also decide that circumcision was, quote, barbaric and bloody act. That's what he said, Geiger. Now, as I recall, he says this in a private letter. So I don't believe he ever publicly advocated getting rid of circumcision. Later, you'd have Reform leaders who definitely got rid of circumcision. As far as I recall, he never publicly spoke about this, but privately thought it was a barbaric act. Why is it barbaric? Because it's not in his mind, it's not a representation, I guess you could say, of the Jewish spirit. He wouldn't fast on Tisha B'Av. Did he fast on Yom Kippur? As far as I know, he did. But we know he didn't fast on Tisha B'Av. He tells us he didn't fast. Because today, for Geiger, we're not mourning over the temple. On the contrary, history has shown that the destruction of the temple was a positive thing, because it led to a different type of Judaism, a more advanced type of Judaism, one not focused on sacrifices in the temple. Geiger has often been criticized for really being an advocate of this idea of Germans of a Mosaic persuasion, although as far as I know, he never used that expression. And there is some truth to this. During the 1840 Damascus affair, there was a Catholic monk or friar and his Muslim servant in Damascus who were killed. And the story was that it was the Jews who did it to take use the blood to make matzah. And Geiger didn't get involved with this. He said that, in fact, hold on a second, I just want to... There's I saw something interesting before on this. Actually, they disappeared, and it's, I don't know if they ever found them again. They disappeared. So, of course, whenever people disappeared, it was the Jews. Even though this is a European thing, the blood libel. There was a French consul, I believe, not the American consul, he was called, who was pushing this, but it created a big problem where the Jews were blamed for this. And Geiger didn't get involved. Geiger said that I'm involved in Jewish spiritual and intellectual development, but when it comes to physical, that this is a human problem, that the Jews are being oppressed there. I relate to them like I relate to many humans who are being oppressed. There's nothing specifically Jewish about it. Geiger's really an early example of this progressive attitude that we see today, this neo-progressive, where you don't want to have any particularism, and that God forbid that you'd be more concerned about Jews than anyone else, because then that shows that you're particularistic and you're a nation, and we can't have that. Although it needs also to be said that later in life, when Jews were being persecuted in Romania, he did try to get the Prussian government to intervene. So this viewpoint of his is not, I guess, a consistent one. But
if you're an intellectual, should you interrupt your work to try to help out individuals? Well, sometimes you should, sometimes you shouldn't. And sometimes your intellectual work is more important than helping out individuals. Maybe you're not going to be particularly effective at helping out individuals. So there are always many ways to distract yourself, but I think it helps in life to have some sort of primary mission and to put your primary energy into that primary mission.
To read his essay or his letter explaining why he doesn't intervene or why he doesn't want to intervene in the Damascus affair, it's really, I even have it here, it's really pathetic. He says that which goes on among the Jews living in the uncivilized country is of trifling importance. He says the only thing that interests him, the universal Jewish concern, is the upper stratum of the Jews. There's those Jews who are advanced intellectually and spiritually. So it's really it's a reflection. It's no different, I think, than how the German Jews related to many of the East European Jews as well. That they looked at them almost as a different species. He said it's a good humanitarian deed to take up the cause, but it's not a Jewish problem per se.
Kind of, you see this with Paul Gottfried, right? Paul Gottfried, his ancestors are from Germany, so there's been tendency in Jewish life for Jews from Western Europe and Central Europe to look down on Eastern European Jews as uncultured and fanatical and barbaric and as a entirely different species, just wild-eyed and fanatical. So Jews of Western European origins like Paul Gottfried, Hungarian, yeah. So Jews from Western Central European origins, right, they tend to come from hundreds of years with generally positive views of non-Jews, respect and admiration for the accomplishments of non-Jews, while Jews from Eastern European backgrounds, they had ancestors who for hundreds of years lived in an atmosphere of mutual fear and loathing of non-Jews. So Jews of Western European origins tended to be more affluent, tended to be the first Jews to the United States. They tended to look down on their wild-eyed, uncouth, uncultured Eastern European brothers as a different species.
Yeah. Nevertheless, I think in conclusion,
So Jews of Eastern European origins tend to be much more radical in their politics, whether radical right or left. Jews of Western European origins tend to be much more centrist, center-right, tend to be Republicans.
About this, you have to say that he was a proud Jew, because like I said, in his own way, he didn't believe in reform to gain equality. He thought equality would come, but he didn't That's not what it was about. And he also didn't believe in a radical break with tradition that so many other reformers wanted it. And he was honest enough to acknowledge that Judaism is still developing. And it's hard to know where in the end it would end up. He supported reform, obviously, but it had to be historical and not revolution. He thought Holstein was engaged in revolution. He wasn't. So really, when you look at reformers, Geiger is not the most radical. On the contrary, in fact, earlier, at first he thought that the rabbis could push, I saw this in Michael Meyer, that the rabbis could push the reform. But later, he sort of backed off and said that the people will push the reform and the rabbis go along with it. Okay, so now let me ask the question. Geiger's a proud Jew. But what's valuable about being Jewish? Why be Jewish? What does Judaism add to the 19th century in Germany? Such an advanced culture, advanced Protestant culture, great philosophers.
Okay, any comment on the sinification of Sydney? Well, the Chinese Communist Party is definitely trying to use money and bribery and everything they can to influence Australian politics. You have Australian politicians who being convicted of taking bribes from the Chinese communists. Chinese have bought a ton of real estate in Australia in general and in Sydney in particular. But Australia's woken up to the Chinese threat. Australia's been pretty tough against China the past 3 years, so I don't see Australia as just a bunch of dupes. I don't see Australia just lying on the bed and getting screwed by China. As for the shooting up of that gay nightclub, notice how the news media is really eager to portray these brave patrons as fighting back, and they may indeed be super brave and amazing, fantastic, altruistic people. But I think part of the reason for the news media wanting to highlight that is that they want to fight against stereotypes of gay cowardice and gay passivity. So I don't know if they're overreacting to negative stereotypes about gays and gay clubs and going out of their way to say how heroic these people are, or they're reflecting something that's real.
And why should it be viewed then as equal to Christianity?
And speaking of
Christianity in the German society, what do we even need it for? Well, Geiger answered, and it's not the only one. The reformers.
So speaking of what happened at that nightclub, there's an interesting article in The Atlantic by Juliette Kayyem. She's a lefty. And she says we may need to rethink the advice we give, rethink, run, hide, fight. So our mass shooting guidance may be woefully out of date. So last night, at least 5 people were killed, 25 injured in a shooting at an LGBTQ nightclub in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And it comes against a backdrop of continuing threats and vilification of the LGBTQ community. Early reports say the suspect, who was alive, was in possession of a long gun, might have killed many more people in such a confined space. And after the actions of, according to police, at least 2 heroic people inside the club, they are believed to have confronted the gunman and stopped the in-progress massacre. So run, hide, fight has been the guiding principle in the security profession for decades. Running is supposed to be your preferred response to a mass shooting. Hiding is the only responsible choice. If you can't run, and then if you can't run and you can't hide, then you should fight back. Right? And that's what people get taught. Try to run, can't run, try to hide, can't run or hide, then you've got no other option than fight back. But given that 70% of active shooter situations end before the police arrive, maybe we need a new approach. Maybe when it comes to general safety, maybe we need to put more priority on fighting, right? instead of hiding. But maybe we need to encourage people to not primarily look to run, don't primarily look to hide. Maybe we need to encourage people to look to fight. And maybe we need more concealed carry as well. It's a lot easier to fight when you have a gun. So a lot of mass shootings have been ended by people fighting a gunman. And they've often sacrificed their lives, but they prevented much wider loss of life. Sometimes these mass shootings have been prevented by good people carrying guns. Back to Mark Shapiro.
All the reformers answered this question, and they coined this expression, which we know in English as the mission of Israel. And now, what does it mean, mission of Israel? Mission is like Jews being missionaries, like going out and converting people. We have not done that in a long, long time. Although, if you look in the New Testament, there's a passage there that speaks about Jews looking to get converts, and we know about this. Herod's forefathers, his grandparents, great-grandparents, I forget now, were forced to be converted. in converts. But that's not what it means. The mission of Israel, as Geiger and other reform leaders see it, is that Jews have a mission to disseminate the moral teachings of Judaism to the rest of the world. And not by converting them, but by bringing them in their own religions to knowledge of these doctrines that we Jews possess. We have.
So it was the reform in the 19th century who started advocating for ethical monotheism. There's one God whose primary demand of his creatures is ethical behavior. I don't think we'll ever have concealed carry legislation in Australia. No, not right now. There seems to be absolutely no impetus. The Australians are absolutely convinced the reason they're so safe is because they make it next to impossible to, legally own and carry a gun. So right now I don't see any significant public sentiment for concealed carry in Australia.
All the doctrines that you see in the Ten Commandments and doctrines about helping the poor and the widow, all these things, doctrines of a pure God. This is going to be one of the issues because they do believe in a pure idea of God. So Jesus is going to be a problem. So although they don't want to rock the boat, the Reformed leaders understand that there still is something important that Judaism could give to the West, mainly a more pure idea of Judaism, because men like Geiger obviously rejected the idea that God is in human form of Jesus. So we Jews, although we're small, we're a minority, we're going to teach you. That's our mission. We're going to teach you not just through doctrines, but through our life. We live a moral life. Jews are not involved in war. Jews are involved in immorality, much less than everyone else. So we've preserved a moral, pure way of life. And we're going to model it for the world. Sound ethnocentric? It was. And believe it or not, that's the reason why, of all the Reformed doctrines, today Reformed Jews, this is the one they want nothing to do with. Because can you imagine Reformed Jews today speak about the mission of Israel? That makes it seem like we're better than other people, or that we have something special. No, that's going to be something that modern Reformers don't want. But for people like Geiger, we are going to, through modeling this, through the mission of Israel, we will help bring the world, the nations of the world, to the Messianic era. Now, what's the Messianic era? The Messianic era, it has nothing to do with prophets or supernatural interventions or anything like that. The Messianic era, or a personal aside for that matter, the Messianic era is an era when the world, like Isaiah says, there's no more war, when people respect one another, when they live in peace. That is the Messianic era. That's what God wants. Earlier generations couldn't appreciate this. They could only imagine a time, because they were living among pagans and barbarians, they could only imagine a time when they'd have to leave these pagans and barbarians and make their way from the four corners of the earth to the land of Israel, where they could create a moral society. That's why they imagine this Messianic vision of return to Israel and building the temple. But today, we live among civilized people, dignified people. So therefore, we have no desire, and God doesn't have a desire for us to return to the land of Israel and start worshiping in an old-fashioned way. No, the Messianic era will take place in every civilized society, and that's what God wants. So it's monotheism, it's personal morality, and it's joined even early on with what we would call social justice. And the social, although the ethical monotheism has been jettisoned from Reform Judaism today because it seems too ethnocentric and too haughty, I guess, that makes us too special. Social justice, not only has it not been jettisoned, social justice for Reform Judaism became the central feature of Reform.
So this message that Jews had a divine mission to teach the world about ethical monotheism, this is what got me so excited in the early 1990s. Dennis Prager's presentation of Judaism as the embodiment, the quintessence of ethical monotheism. Right? This has got my motor going during my conversion to Judaism.
Judaism, where everyone is called to.
So now I've changed my thinking. I don't think people are primarily changed ethically, morally by instruction such as ethical monotheism. I think people are primarily morally improved by improving the quality of their connections. First of all with themselves, second of all with other people. So people are at ease with themselves and their friends, family, community tend to be at ease with others and tend to generally act in a pro-social and ethical way. But people who are alienated from themselves, alienated from other people, alienated from the community, people who lack close connections, these are the most dangerous people. Right? And so far more important than inculcating people in ethical monotheism is anything you can do to help people come to terms with themselves, with their own flaws, their own reality, their own history, and come to terms with the flawed nature of other people around them so that they can then move on to have better relations with themselves first of all and with others. And then people tend to behave much more ethically.
Help improve social welfare of society is a hallmark. It's a defining characteristic today. They term it tikkun olam. Tikkun olam, it's only really from the 1960s that tikkun olam comes to mean social justice. Tikkun olam has Messianic connotations, and if you go back to the Talmud, you can...
So tikkun olam, repairing the world, is in the Aleinu prayer, which goes back approximately 2,000 years. But that's repairing the world under the rule of God. It's not, repairing the world under left-wing socialist politics. So this notion that tikkun olam means left-wing social justice politics, right, that's only about 50 years old.
we can have similar type of expressions that talk about, making good decrees so that the society functions. But tikkun olam, in a sense, it's a great expression. And I don't know who was the first to coin it, but I believe it's from the 60s, certainly not in the 50s. But although in the 50s, you had people speaking about civil rights, things like that. So you had this notion, look, if you get rid of Jewish law, if you don't have halacha, you need to fill it with something else. So what do you fill it with? You fill it with something which is part and parcel of Judaism. Social justice, I hate to say it, but if you start reading passages today from Isaiah, people think you're a Reformed Jew. You go into Orthodox school and you start doing it, then I think you're a Reformed Jew. But that's because the Orthodox have forgotten a large measure, just like the Reformed forgot a large measure. So the Orthodox have only been focused on halacha, and the Reformed didn't have halacha, so they focus on Isaiah. But the truth is that they both are necessary, and they're both vital, and Isaiah himself kept halacha. So you can't get rid of them. You can't jettison it. If you look take a look in Vayikra, in chapter 18, 19, I forget which one it is, where you get the important psukim, just weights and measures, and carrying out the will of the poor people and all that. Right next to that, you have things dealing with no tattoos and shaving with a razor and sexual crimes. In other words, the ritual and the social and the moral, we combine them. They're all together, and you see that very clearly in that chapter. I think it's chapter 19 of Vayikra. Unlike what the Reform said, unlike what the Christians said, that you have to divide the ceremonial ritual. The ritual is only temporary, it's not eternal, so that we can get rid of, but we still can hold on to the moral. But you see that the ritual and the moral are intertwined, and you can't have one without the other. But it did become a hallmark of the movement, the reform movement of social justice, and even it's the Center for Social Action, and it was directed by David Saperstein. I don't know if he's retired yet, but and the movement is committed to liberalism, liberalism. It's not just liberalism, progressivism, separation of church and state as well, but all these social justice things. In fact, Jacob Petrovsky comes from an Orthodox background. He's a leading reform thinker. He wrote a very good book called Prayer Book Reform in Europe, and he has an article, a special article devoted to, it's called Karaite Tendencies in Early Reform, because you had some of these early reform leaders who were so anti-rabbinic that they almost became Karaites. But he wrote in one of his last essays during the Judge Bork conference. Let me see here if I can quickly. So I never met Petrovsky. I always wanted to. He dies in 1991. So that was, so it was the 1980s. It was under Reagan that Judge Bork was, they nominated him. Am I right about that? Was it? Yeah, it was definitely it was President Reagan. So Petrovsky wrote an essay in which he said he walked into a reform synagogue. He was a leading reform thinker. And he said, right as he walked in on the right, there was petitions there to send to your senator to oppose Judge Bork being raised to the Supreme Court. And he concluded from that Reform Judaism had failed because it had become liberalism with a Jewish flavor. And as an old Reform Jew, Petrovsky's point was that it's fine to be liberal, but Reform Judaism can't just be a branch of the Democratic Party. It has to be Judaism. And Republicans also have to be welcome in Reform Judaism. Let me make another point before I go on. Instead, I don't. It's tough sometimes. I think for a conservative with a small c Jew to be reformed because the movement itself is so tied to social justice. And but it's not just the reform movement. We see this in the world at large as well.
Yeah, if you go to a reform synagogue, right, at most 5% of the congregation will be on the right, and 99% of rabbis, reform rabbis, are on the left. Conservative congregation, probably more than 90% will be on the left. Fewer than 10% will be on the right. Modern Orthodox congregation, probably 60% will be Republicans, 40% Democrats. And then traditional Orthodox will be 80-90% Republicans to 10-20% Democrats.
And for example, I'll take wokeism, for instance, anti-racism, all these movements you have here. People need something. They need something to guide them. They need some purpose in life. If you don't have traditional religion, you need to fill it with something to give your life meaning. So there's been a lot. Andrew Sullivan and John Porter has a whole book on this. Hold on a second. I'll show you in which he makes this case. He goes, woke racism, how a new religion has betrayed Black America. But his point is that wokeism and social justice, that these are religions. And there's a lot of truth, I think, to this. That, in fact, he has this. I'll just play you something here. Because I think what you see in Reform Judaism, how social justice became a religion, as they were lacking in traditional religion. You see this in the world at large, in wokeism and progressivism, that it's become their own religion. And one of the early people to speak about this, although he focuses more on anti-racism, not on wokeism as a whole, but it was John McWhorter. I'll just play you just 2 minutes of what he has to say, because it's very relevant, I think.
What's the issue here? Why in the world would I say that anti-racism is a problem? Because, of course, no, it's not a problem to not be a racist, and I don't think any of us would be here if we thought the debate was over that. So, of course, we don't want to be a racist. Racism is bad. We We know that. But what about the more complex and therefore more interesting issues? And one issue is that anti-racism, as currently configured, has gone a long way from what used to be considered intelligent and sincere civil rights activism. Today, it's a religion. And I don't mean that as a rhetorical feint. I mean that it actually is what any naive anthropologist would recognize as a faith in people, many of whom don't think of themselves as religious, but Galileo would recognize them quite easily. And so, for example, the idea that the responsible white person is supposed to attest to their white privilege and realize that it can never go away and feel eternally guilty about it, that's original sin right there. The idea that there is going to be a day when America comes to terms with race, or that there could be. What does that even mean? What is the meaning of the coming to terms? What would that consist of? Who would come to them? What would the terms be? At what date would this be? The only reason that anybody says that is because it corresponds to our conception of Judgment Day, and it's equally abstract. When we use the word problematic, especially since about 2008 or 9, what we're really saying is blasphemous. It's really the exact...
Reduced to playing some Richard Spencer here.
And Haas was also mentioning this concept. It's actually a Russian word called the narod. There's actually a Russian social movement called the Narodnik. Now, narod, I am not a Russian speaker, but to the degree that I understand it, narod is comparable to the word populist, or in the German language that I'm much more familiar with, the adjective völkisch, or das Volk. I would remind you, during the fall of the Soviet Union, when there were protests in East Germany, in which the original protest line was "Wir sind das Volk," which means we are the people. And it was basically a call for a better version of communism, a communism that listens to the people, that is able to change and is able to at least recognize some of the obvious problems of the regime. Maybe a communism that's more democratic, you could say. Wir sind das Volk, we are the people. That eventually started to change and transform as the collapse of the Soviet Union progressed to Wir sind ein Volk, which means we are a people. In other words, it transformed into a call for the reunification of the entire country of Germany. And it was a populist call, but of course the word völkisch or folk could also be translated as race, or not just people, or ethnic group, I guess, although that's a less punchy translation. It is a call to a people in the same way that Trump's mention of the wall, whatever he might have meant by it, whatever its intentions, was a folkish call. It was a defining of a people in just a single word. And so Haas was evoking this idea of the narod, which means populace. Now, there was an interesting controversy in the early 20th century. This morning I actually read Vladimir Lenin's short article, The Proletariat and the Peasantry, and it actually gets to this issue with Marxism in the sense of what do you do with the peasants in Russia? Now, as you probably know, there is this kind of contradiction or at least something that's rather interesting and kind of unpredictable about the fact that a Marxist revolution occurred in Russia and not, say, in Paris or London. According to a certain orthodox Marxism, any kind of proletarian revolution would have occurred in London or Paris or Berlin or New York or something. That is precisely where the urban proletariat is found. That's where it is most advanced and thus most likely to spill over into a new stage of history. Russia's backwards. The peasants were only liberated in the 1860s, and obviously a Marxist would look at that as a kind of false liberation. You weren't literally bound to the land, but you're still susceptible to capital. You haven't reached human emancipation, which is what a Marxist wants. You've simply reached a kind of political emancipation, and maybe an emancipation in name only. So what do you do with Russia? It's seemingly 100 years behind Germany or England or the United States. It's a different world. And what do you do with this? Well, Lenin was arguing explicitly that this is a unique situation, but this doesn't mean that the peasants as well can't be a revolutionary subject. And he called upon that narod sentiment of the people, and in Russia's case, the peasants. So Haas was kind of trying to connect this, I think, with the American middle being a kind of revolutionary subject. Now, that doesn't mean that the people who support MAGA are impoverished proletarian workers. In fact, many of them are truck drivers. They might even own their own truck. Many of them might be the little bosses of capitalism. They might have a sandwich shop in some town and have employees. They might be a sole proprietor. They might own their own tools and be a plumber. They might even be a bit wealthy. You can make a lot of money if you're a successful plumber or a successful electrician. You're certainly middle class if you succeed at those things. But he sees them as revolutionary in the sense that they are totally alienated from mainstream institutions in the way that
Right. So as the left dominates almost all our institutions, people feel alienated who aren't on the left, and they want to overthrow our current elites. That seems normal, natural, healthy. Depends how you go about it. You can go about it in a stupid, destructive, illegal, criminal, idiotic way, or you can do it in a smart, productive way.
other proletarian forces are not. And so, he was using the metaphor of a barista. It's like a girl who works at a coffee shop and who has a undergraduate degree from NYU and is working as a barista and votes for Joe Biden. She's in a way not alienated from the institutions. Even if she makes $25,000 a year and an electrician in Nebraska makes $90,000 a year, but is kind of, again, alienated from contemporary American institutions. So obviously someone who's, say, working on Wall Street or is a professor
Okay, so anyone who's right-wing is going to be alienated from our dominant institutions today, which are seemingly controlled by the left.
a public or private institution, or even a public school teacher, or someone in corporate America, they have so much to lose by a social transformation. A social transformation that would jeopardize the system that they ultimately benefit from in big ways, in the case of the Wall Street executive, and in small ways, I would say, in the case of a public school teacher. But nevertheless, they are tied to the system. They want it to succeed, and they might even protect it with their life because it gives them their livelihood, you could say. Now, in the case of the folkish American proletariat, they are alienated from these institutions. They see taxes as just simply a cost to them that they can't really bear. They don't see any benefit in.
Yeah, I think you see Trump voters feeling increasingly alienated from America and its institutions. That's why they want to take back the country. They feel the country is slipping away out of their grasp to becoming something unrecognizable.
In financial or academic or civic institutions. All of these things are just cost to them, or a club to which they're not invited to join. And thus, they become a kind of revolutionary subject. They have nothing to lose but their chains. They are exactly the type of population that would attack existing institutions and seek to transform society. Now, again, I am not a Marxist, as I'm sure you know, but I do admire Marx as an intellectual. I don't.
Why? Like, why would you admire Marx? Like, what is so admirable about Marx? That I don't get. Like, what are the insights that are unique to Marx? Like, I don't get, why would anyone admire Karl Marx? I just don't know anything that he was right about. I don't know anything he said that was new, that was true, or anything true that he said that was new. I don't get this.
I don't also think that you should associate Marx or equate Marx with, say, the Soviet Union.
So every time people have tried to implement Marxism, it's been absolutely horrible. But Marx is great. Really?
He was a remarkable 19th century thinker in line with Nietzsche or even Freud, I guess, in the 20th century.
Okay, so Marx and Freud, right? I think Paul Johnson wrote a book called The Enemies of the People, right? Yeah, I think listing Marx with Freud is telling, because Freud was overwhelmingly a journey in a wrong direction, right? I think Freudianism has overwhelmingly been a force for ill. Marxism has overwhelmingly been a force for ill. So thinking Marx and Freud there, absolutely agree with Richard Spencer. I just disagree that these are great thinkers, important intellectuals, people showing us the way.
These were remarkable intellectuals who did turn thought on its head. So I do admire them, and
Yeah, they turned thought on its head in the wrong direction. Right? They led us in the wrong direction. They did far more harm than good.
he's a Marxist, and just because there might be this association, fair or otherwise, with communism and all these things that I generally don't like, doesn't mean that you can't find insights in his work. Doesn't mean.
Look, every time Marxism was tried, it was awful, absolutely awful. Right? When Freudianism has been put into practice, right, it's been at best a waste of time. It's been a mass delusion. So I don't sympathize with this praise for Karl Marx and Sigmund Freud.
Doesn't mean that he isn't kind of telling you something. And I think every person should be, and every writer should be judged by the merits and not necessarily by their associations. But anyway,
I think it's fair to judge, writers by the product of their writing and their thinking. That if you're leading people down a dark tunnel, if every time your thought is implemented, it makes the world a worse place, yeah, I think it's fair to judge you for that.
I would say to this is that I do find this theory compelling. But in a way, we've already seen what could possibly come from a revolutionary American proletariat. And what we saw of that was something like January 6th. Now, you could say that January 6th, it was all about QAnon, this crazy conspiracy. It was all about the big lie, that is Donald Trump's insistence that he didn't lose the 2020 election, which might very well have been motivated by his...
I think January 6th was a rude explosion by people who are unwilling to give power to processes that they didn't understand, that they thought were illegitimate. And so they rose up and said, enough. And I want them prosecuted to the full extent of the law. But I have some sympathy for the energy.
His obviously malignant narcissism, just his refusal to accept any sort of defeat, because he doesn't have a stable sense of self, and losing would mean breaking his person, and that's just something he couldn't abide. And he just spread this lie, this narcissistic lie among his followers, and they had to pay the price. They were the ones who got arrested. We'll see if Trump does get arrested, but at least for now, he's got away scot-free from January 6th, even though he was obviously involved in it. And all of that is true. I actually don't deny any of that, as you can probably tell. But was there something more about it? Even if those people who invaded the Capitol and at least came to the Capitol on January 6th, and I don't know, I've seen estimates, I don't quite know how many there are, tens of thousands at the very least. It was a huge amount of people, and for every one person who came to the Capitol on January 6th, there were probably 100 or 1,000 more who wanted to be there, or who were following it closely, or who sympathized with exactly what they were doing. And they were revolutionary. I mean, you really can't deny it. And this is why I really can't stand.
Yeah, they were revolutionary, and what they did seemed absolutely idiotic and criminal, but it may galvanize, it may create a winning movement. Like January 6th in and of itself was a loser of an event. It created tremendous backlash, but it may catalyze energy, it may develop a movement that down the road wins. So on its face, January 6th was just a loser. But January 6th didn't just occur in a vacuum, right? It also influenced people, catalyzed people, helped to grow a movement.
And a lot of the conservative apologists, you could say, about January 6th. They're like, oh, well, things got out of hand. There were a few bad apples, but, it was just a lawful protest. Or people who say, it didn't get out of hand. It was all Antifa or something like that. Or the guards opened up the doors and encouraged people to go in. All of that is a total misrepresentation. There are videos of the guards, by the way, kind of opening up the doors, but there are also videos of dramatic, violent confrontations with police. So you have to balance both of those things. Anyway, I can't stand any of that apologist that you see from Tucker Carlson or from American Greatness or something at the blog, or that you'll sometimes hear on more outlandish podcasts about how Antifa did it. I think MTG might actually believe that, but I can't stand all of that stuff. It's all a bunch of lies, and in many ways, it misrepresents and demeans the sincerity of the January 6th protesters. And I am not on their side. I was totally out of the loop with that stuff. I did not support it. I found it laughable and buffoonish, but I won't doubt their sincerity. Their feeling that they were part of something bigger than themselves, that they were...
Okay, so they had a hero system, right? Sometimes your hero system leads you down a dark criminal corridor, which appears to be the case here. Sincerity doesn't really count for anything, right? Sincerity doesn't make you any more likely to be productive, efficient, effective, good, righteous. Sincerity is not a positive virtue in and of itself.
They were actually engaging in a kind of revolution. They wanted to hang Mike Pence. That was a novelty gallows, you could say, but they got their hands on him. They probably would have hanged him, to be frank. There were some funny videos of one woman who was interviewed by...
Okay, so will follow the revolution. To be continued. Bye-bye. A better time to listen to some Richard Spencer here than at the end of the world.
Generally don't care, to be honest.
Okay, I was just wondering because I thought some of the videos you guys together. No, then that's no slight at Ed Dutton or
Talking
nothing
about
with these days.
Right.
Richard
I
and
thought
Mark Brahman
Millennial Woes was a pretty
and Millennial Woes.
Yeah,
intelligent guy at times.
He is an intelligent guy. I would certainly be willing to do something with him, but yeah, I mean, there was a...
I think Richard's main problem with Millennial Woes is aesthetic. He just finds him dumpy and grubby.
There was a real, there's a just kind of cliquish kind of stuff going on. And I guess I'm a clique of one. So, yeah, but I don't have anything, nothing happened, and I don't have any ill will or anything. At the same time, I kind of want to move past a lot of that stuff, to be honest. Just the white nationalism, it just bores me.
I don't.
Frank.
I wouldn't call him a white nationalist.
Well, okay, but...
Of course, Millennial Woes is
It's
a white
really
nationalist.
good description.
That was all. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Mike.
Hey, hi, Richard. I stopped calling you Rich. Yeah, sorry about that. I was watching or listening to a Nick Fuentes space he had, I think, and you were in it. It was about 4 weeks ago, and you two hadn't talked in years, and what a nice meeting that was. You were both very gracious towards each other, even though you have some opposing ideology, and it was really nice seeing that. He gave his analysis of you afterwards. I thought it was pretty good. He said he had told you for years, or he had told you, not for years, but he said, look, you're an intellectual, you're an elitist, and you write well. You should stick to writing and not go on these tours. He said it just wasn't something that you were really built for. I thought
Nice conversation. I thought it was a bit rude what he said afterward, to be honest with you.
Oh, really? I didn't. I thought he gave Richard a lot. He called Richard an intellectual.
It's fine. Yeah. I was not expecting that. I was looking at Twitter as I was working that, and there was a space with a couple hundred people in it, and I was curious. Lo and behold, Nick was there. It was rather surprising. I actually was expecting, this typical Fuentes, insult barrage, but I served the ball across the court in a respectful manner, and it was returned. So I thought that was good. I will say this about Fuentes. I do think that there's kind of a man behind the mask, so to speak. Maybe it's a kid wearing a Darth Vader helmet, but there's still like someone there. And so I do think he's able to listen or things like that. In terms of, criticism of me, I mean, whatever. I mean, I appreciate being called a good writer and so on. I do think that I'm good in front of a crowd, but that probably can't happen because of the world we live in. But we'll see. But I think the main thing is I really don't want to go down the path again, because the path doesn't really lead anywhere. I mean, the path that you tread being a kind of Trump fan is the path towards January 6th or something like that. I mean, that's the way that Nick is used. I mean, Nick is very good in front of a crowd. He is very good on his live streams. He has an organic audience, unlike many conservatives. But that, if he's playing the game of being, at the end of the day, a Republican or Trump cheerleader, there will be people who will ultimately use him for their own ends. People who don't have an organic audience, who don't have charisma or whatever you want to call it stuff. And they're going to use him, and they're going to put him in situations where he's going to take the fall. Stop the Steal being an excellent example. But, anyway, I do think that Nick kind of there's a man behind the mask, or a boy behind the mask. I do think there's a real person there. But I also think that, our ideological differences are pretty great.
Okay, let's fast forward here. There we go.
Death squads, right-wing death squads. Didn't she say that? So she was kind of on that
Laura Loomer
version of the alt-right. But I can't imagine her voting for a Democrat. I mean, she's a conservative movement monster.
Oh, Ann Coulter.
She's such a glamorous queen. I'm obsessed with her.
Yeah, I like Ann Coulter.
And a Christian.
He has some good books. God, I could never stand conservative. It's just such an anti-intellectual movement, and it's just so, I don't know, it just doesn't have a vision.
Because
I think by anti-intellectual he means unaesthetic, right? Not aesthetically pleasing.
leftists are
reactionary.
so
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. Should you consider yourself like that?
So it's about what's cool, right? It's not so much about what's intellectual. It's about what's cool.
Race realist, liberal? Would that be an accurate assessment of your ideology? What would you call yourself? Well, I mean, I do. I guess you could really call me a race realist. I mean, I think that's a very
Do you
real
like
thing.
Steve Saylor?
Published. Yeah, I think Steve Saylor's fun. I've always liked Steve Saylor. But yeah, I mean, again, my concerns, like what I actually care about, is just a lot bigger than the stuff.
Like what? What do you care about?
Well, we're moving towards Apolloism.
Apolloism?
Apolloism.
Like
Yes.
like paganism.
Yes.
Apolloism. What?
I'm glad I'm shocking you all.
You are? Oh my gosh. Okay. Let me Google that real quick.
Same.
Do you want that to be like a dominant religion in the culture, and why?
Yeah, hopefully around the world.
I have a serious question for you, Richard.
Okay.
How shocked were you when Roland Martin informed you that Egypt was in fact in Africa?
That was pretty. I believe I said that Egyptians are white, which is maybe not the best. maybe, although not inaccurate entirely, at least for founders. But yeah, I mean, it was maybe the best response in that context of that kind of hostile interview. But yes, I do think that there are people out like Egypt, like African Egyptology is kind of similar to the Kanye stuff about like whatever he believes. I don't know exactly what he believes. I think some people, like people in that documentary that Kyrie Irving mentioned, I believe they think the Jews of the Bible were sub-Saharan Africans. I think Kanye, again, to be trying to accurately represent what he thinks, I think that he believes that Africans were almost like the Cushites or something. They were like a tribe of Israel. But I don't think he is. I remember.
I don't think he has stable beliefs. He's just saying.
Yeah, that's fair, but he kind of does believe in something, like however weird it might be, he has a belief system. I remember seeing him shake his head when Lex Friedman said, "This reminds me of Black Hebrewite stuff." And he kind of shook his head, so I'll take him at his word. I think he believes that like he's the tribe of Cush or something like this, or African Americans or Africans are. And then he also kind of said, but everyone comes from Africa, and so the Jews come from Africa, so he becomes a Jew that way too. I mean, who knows exactly? It is rather weird, but I do think he sincerely believes those things.
Question for you, Richard. I know you've been in favor of on Ukraine in this global position here. Are you at all concerned about and possible nuclear ramifications for what's happening right now, or is that something that you're not quite too concerned about?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm concerned about it, but it is what it is. I mean, in the sense that, I don't think we should just say, oh, well, let's give up on Ukraine and let's get out of NATO so we don't risk nuclear war or something like that. I don't believe in those things. We're in it. We have certain responsibilities. I think in many ways, actually, I think a conflict with Russia is just what the doctor ordered, you could say. Once there is a kind of, conflict is natural and it's defining. And I think it could actually revive the West in a way. I think it could bring a kind of realism to the way we operate that, unipolarity or whatever just wouldn't. So, yeah, I don't really quite think of it as kind of alien ways where everyone's just kind of allergic to conflict.
So Steve
Clearly
Saylor's
conservatives like
his
Chad
time,
believes that,
he was talking
if
about
only we could just trade and live in tiny little
what
statelets,
do the
there'd be no
Republicans
problems in the world or something like
have
that. I
to
never believed
do
that.
to combine
Yeah, I understand where you're coming
the
from, but I mean, millions of people
elements of their
might die from
coalition,
World
the
War
working
III,
class, and
you
the
know, like I said,
managerial
that's not
class.
good.
Well, they're going to
What
die
a
anyway.
possible
And,
policies in the field for both the working
But
class
don't you think
unions
preventing
and the
that, just
managerial
not having a
class?
war, just letting Ukraine and Russia fight
Traditionally,
it out,
the
is just,
Republican
we can't just let that
case
be.
was the country club set, the
I don't know.
managerial class.
Sounds a little pathetic there, Chad.
Now,
A wonderful
Republicans
place
are
here on
raising
the edge of the world
down
to
the
listen
Not
to
afraid of
Mark
anything,
Shapiro,
just don't want millions of people to die.
Texas wrote a
the
very
party of the working
interesting
class.
article.
How can
And
they
Russia
begin
and the American government is more of a threat.
Abortion restrictions in Florida, and they claim that it violates Jewish
the
law.
managerial
I
class?
understand.
So what Professor
I understand.
So,
If I'm being
I
offensive,
think
he wants to
the
know whether
Republicans'
this,
number one
that's all I understand. I understand your point.
vote-winning issue
Talking with you is a blast from the past because
is
there was a time in my life where I was surrounded by
So
female
anything they
experience,
can
so I kind
do
of know
to
the way
emphasize
and I
their
know
on my
child
show,
fighting
you were on my show.
program, locking up
the Chad factor.
charges.
Who among us can forget the Chad factor?
Well, it's like 3 strikes and you're out.
G'day mate, 40 here.
Tough
Let me know if
order,
there's too much wind. I'm still at
Main Street
Beach.
safer, knocking
That's
out
all
bad
right,
guys.
Speaking hatefully is a bad thing,
Pretty
right?
good program.
Being unnecessarily hateful,
Do you think that by
saying, all these bad things should happen to a particular group, that's bad. Harassing people, going to their workplace or their house of worship or their community, that's a bad thing.
There'll be safety to invest.
These terms have been so grossly
Programs going
inflated
demonstrate things.
to essentially cover any type of speech that I don't like. So on Twitter, effectively, over the past
to live near super predators.
6 years or so, harassment simply meant disagreeing with a woman. If you disagree with a woman on Twitter, you puncture her logic in any way, you're harassing her. So Alex Jones was banned from social media. All the social media companies effectively acted in uniform back in 2018. I was ambivalent because Alex Jones has said so many just wrong, harmful things, leading to the harassment of Sandy Hook parents.
Interpretation is
So I was ambivalent. I'm almost a free speech absolutist, but I was ambivalent when big tech banned Alex Jones. It didn't particularly bother me. I understand why people would not want him on their platform. On the other hand, I have no problem in saying why conservatives would want Alex Jones unbanned. Alex Jones is right-wing. He does support Republicans to the right wing against the left. So he is, to a degree, a comrade in arms, just that he appeals to a lower IQ audience. So I was thinking, what do Alex Jones just been sort of have in common? And one thing that we all have in common is that we all want to be a more exciting place than it is. So we're all romantic. Read more into reality that's really there. So Alex Jones speaks to a 95 IQ audience. Richard Spencer speaks to an audience with an average IQ around 115. I think my audience has an average IQ around 115. So the type of excitement that the 115 IQ person seeks out is very different from the type of excitement the 95 IQ person seeks out. But Alex Jones is on the right. Right, so he is furthering Republicans. He is fighting the left. I don't care for Alex Jones. I think he does a tremendous amount of harm. But I have to recognize that he is a fellow fighter on the right, so I understand why conservatives would want to see him unbanned. And Coulter says that Donald Trump, first thing you need to do is not unban Elon Musk. First thing you need to do is not so much unban Donald Trump, but the first thing you need to do is to unban
about why conservatives love Alex Jones so much. It wasn't so much about why Alex Jones should be banned from Twitter.
It's easy to understand why conservatives love Alex Jones because he's appealing to a low IQ crowd like Donald Trump. Donald Trump's the troll whisperer. Like Donald Trump is excellent at speaking to the 95 IQ audience. And so too with Alex Jones. He's speaking to an audience that wants excitement and purpose and meaning in life. They want to feel like they're living from the inside and they're getting the real deal. They're finally understanding how the world works around them. And because they only have an IQ of around 95, right, their intellectual possibilities are quite limited. If they weren't listening to Alex Jones, they would not be reading Shakespeare.
Like what Donald Trump engaged in against starting in the wars, he dialed back intervention overseas.
In terms
I
of
think
the free speech issue. That
should
is
be a winner for both the
want to
working
tolerate
class and
someone
the managerial
who is
class.
absolutely polluting the discourse.
Okay, I agree with that. But what do you expect from someone who's speaking to the 90-95 IQ?
Going to lawyers,
and what I mean by that is that he's not only wrong. Obviously, many people are wrong. Most academic articles and the sciences are actually kind of wrong, more or less. But he's acting in a kind of bad faith. I think Alex Jones might very well believe what he's saying. I think he does, actually. But
it doesn't matter whether or not Alex Jones believes in what he's saying. Sincerity is not a virtue, right? Sincerity is not something we need more of.
He's just being a completely deluded personality. And because he has this charisma, he is able to gain a tremendous following. And he's able to grift off this following and just...
It's not his charisma, it's the sense of excitement that he brings. Right? He gives dumb people
a way of understanding the world that is tremendously exciting.
It's an incredible way. So he really has monetized.
It's similar to what Richard Spencer has done. He's given deluded people an excited way of understanding the world, and it's what Richard Spencer's still doing, right, with Apolloism, right? It's a romantic, exciting way of understanding the world and feeling like you're living from the inside, and this is the real deal. Now you're connected to the universe, and you're aligned with your true self, right? It's one romantic crusade after another for Richard, and one romantic crusade after another for Alex Jones. Just that one person speaking to a crowd with an average IQ around 115 to 120, and another bloke is speaking to a crowd with an average IQ around 90.
Winner for both the working class.
Delusion. And I do think that kind of figure is deeply toxic. You have to have some
thoughtful deregulation.
Yeah, Alex Jones
encourage
is toxic,
entrepreneurship.
right? He's motivated people to do horrible things, such as harass the Sandy Hook parents who lost their children in that mass shooting at Sandy Hook.
Intelligently done, thoughtfully done.
If people look to Alex Jones for more than entertainment value and start taking some of his more deluded perspective seriously and start harassing people on that basis, yeah, it's toxic. But same thing could be said for many of the followers of Richard Spencer, and take many of the things that Richard has said seriously. So it's not just the message, it's how it plays out with a particular audience. So how many hundreds of people's lives have been damaged because of Richard Spencer? How many hundreds of people's lives have been damaged by Alex Jones? Again, the people that both of them have damaged are people who've been seeking, illicit forms of excitement.
A more nationalist American
reality
nationalist
to speak and to actually contribute to discourse. There really is no value in listening to a schizophrenic tell you about how space aliens are telling her that her aunt wants to kill her, and it's a really big problem, and that's what.
So there's been some reasonably thoughtful stuff on Alex Jones. Richard Spencer was a willing guest on Alex Jones. He was a willing guest on Russia Today.
Trumpism,
right? Richard said at the time he went on Alex Jones because he's an American institution. So if you look at Richard Spencer and Alex Jones as entertainment, then they're not going to have a toxic effect on you. All right? Richard Spencer's intellectual entertainment. Alex Jones is conspiratorial entertainment. If you look to them for more than entertainment, you're going to go wrong. But if you put them in their proper genre of entertainers, provocateurs, shock jocks, right? Put people in their proper genre, they're much less likely to hurt you.
That's why she's locked herself in her room for 48 hours. There's really no value in that. And
okay, the only people who are going to lock themselves in their room for 48 hours after listening to Alex Jones are people who are already mentally ill.
I don't know. Saying I'm pro free speech or something, that's what everyone says. And when everyone says something, that means that it is ultimately a meaningless platitude. There actually is such a thing as bad speech. And there is such a thing that is just so toxic and stupid, but which seems to be able to kind of call upon, base emotions or maybe even incipient schizophrenia among the audience.
Okay, and you could say the same thing for much of Richard Spencer's work. When he was going around saying, "Hail our people, hail freedom, Sieg Heil," and his followers were greeting him with Nazi salutes. All right, this is the same kind of manic, deluded, schizophrenic energy that Alex Jones appeals to.
Yes, and I think it actually is extremely bad. And at the very least, we should talk about it seriously and not just kind of grandstand about our love for free speech. But anyway,
Yeah, I give Richard credit here. This is something that is to be spoken about seriously, and much of what Alex Jones puts out is toxic, is bad for people, does lead people in a bad direction. Though the very same thing could be said for much of what Richard Spencer has promoted, his compadres have promoted, right? A lot of lives have been ruined by people pushing edgy, dissident right, neo-Nazi material.
What motivated me to write this little blog? Let me post it here. How do you post things? My main issue really isn't so much of, is Alex Jones acting in bad faith? Is Alex Jones polluting public square? But why conservatives love Alex Jones?
Okay, it's easy why they conserve Alex Jones because he's on their side, right? They're all right wing, and they see the left as an enemy. Oh man! Now Twitter why are you doing this to me, bro? I'm trying to run quality production here. And Twitter keeps messing with me.
Hello, everyone.
There we go.
Yelling at people. And so one of the excuses made for Alex Jones is basically he knows not what he does. He's just this innocent, goofy, good-natured guy who's worried about losing his country, and he's attacking Democrats. And well,
okay, yeah, Richard's right. That's a stupid excuse.
He claims that they're literally vampires, but well, we all get it wrong sometimes. But he's headed in the right direction, and he's innocent in the sense of being naive. He knows not what he's doing. I think on another level, Alex Jones represents a really serious problem with conservatism, in the sense that everything is an emergency for them.
Look, Alex Jones is just a really dumb, low IQ version of conservatism. I'm sure there are lots of dumb, low IQ versions of left-wing thought as well.
The election is the most important election of your lifetime, and what it is, it's about saying no to something. They are naysayers.
No, what it is about creating meaning and excitement for people, particularly people with not terribly many options and without much cognitive capacity.
It's about loudly yelling no at the latest novelty. It's wearing masks or drag queen story hour or CRT or whatever. And I also...
Yeah, a hero system's a biological necessity. There's some way of attaching yourself to something greater than yourself. Absolute biological necessity. We all fear being insignificant, and so we're looking to attach ourselves to a cause, to something that transcends us, something that's going to outlive us. We want to attach ourselves to something that goes back in time and will outlive us. And by attaching ourselves to something like that, then we can overcome our own fear of insignificance.
It's all of those things, but they're a type of person who's kind of overwhelmed by the world. They're overwhelmed by progressives who are kind of...
Well, what type of people were attracted to Richard Spencer back in the day? Similarly, people who are overwhelmed by the world, looking for meaning and excitement, looking for thrills, looking to take on some kind of heroic quest. These are the same people who are interested in Richard Spencer's version of Apolloism.
Pushing forward. And so they're playing whack-a-mole, or it's just this endless rearguard action that we got to yell no at something new this time. And when you're in that situation of being overwhelmed, there's no time and there's no ability to actually put forth a vision of the world. And as I wrote, in that sense, the conservative intellectual really becomes an oxymoron. You can't think about these things too deeply or too clearly or with too much nuance, because after all, it's an emergency.
Look, a conservative intellectual is not a conservative activist. Activists are not intellectuals. So Richard's making genre errors here. People who are intellectuals are not activists. People who are activists are not intellectuals. Activists have rational incentives for enlisting Alex Jones to their cause or finding common ground with Alex Jones. Conservative intellectuals are not forming common ground with Alex Jones.
I don't want to hear about your analysis of the situation. I don't want to hear about your nuance. I don't want to hear about your self-criticism. They're out to get your kids. So they are kind of schizophrenic on some level, and I think that's maybe another reason why Alex Jones appeals to them.
No, different parts of the conservative movement are not schizophrenic. They're just different genres, different parts. Activists are not intellectuals. Intellectuals are not activists. Right? Conservative intellectuals are not making common ground with Alex Jones. Ann Coulter is a pundit. She's not an intellectual. Ben Shapiro is a pundit. He's not an intellectual.
But I do think that is that kind of, what did Buckley write in the initial pages of National Review to stand before history yelling stop? That might very well be the best maxim of the conservative. That is what he is constantly doing. And Alex Jones is doing that for them. And he's kind of representing their inner id in the sense that he's not doing it with any pretense of respectability. He's just ripping his shirt off and loudly yelling at people. And so he kind of represents the internet. He is who, Ann Coulter or conservatives would be if they had his energy and charisma and they had abandoned all pretense of respectability. So anyway, there it is. There's my argument. If you guys want to hop in, you're welcome. We already have one request here.
So another reason that many conservatives want to form some common ground with Alex Jones is they want to get on his show. They want to be promoted by his media ecosystem. Alex Jones has promoted some true things, some good things, some accurate things, some prescient things. That Matt Drudge used to link to him a lot back in the day. So Alex Jones hasn't just done bad, hasn't just deteriorated the public discourse, hasn't just been a buffoon or an idiot or encouraged mental illness. He's also done a lot of good things. People are complicated.
Reginald Moritz Rosen.
All right, go before.
Hello, Richard. How are you?
I'm pretty good.
I'm doing well myself. So personally, I fully agree with you. I think Alex Jones truly has no place anymore in the conservative movement. Frankly, I think there was a case to be made perhaps when he was a younger man and he was doing things like predicting 9/11 and whatnot. Well, maybe
he's predicting 9/11.
I won't say he predicted it. I will say there's a video of him, saying things which eventually came to pass. However, you're right.
See, that's ultimately bullshit because, if you're one of these guys who endlessly predicts that the stock market's going to crash or endlessly predicts that the New York Yankees are going to lose a baseball game, you're going to be right at some point. And you can kind of come back with that and say, "Oh, Alex Jones was right." And I just find that
I've only seen one clip of him predict. Perhaps he was saying it for years, and if that's the case, then I would agree with you. But nowadays, he talks about how he's going to eat his neighbor's ass and all these other crazy stuff. I think there's a term in French called dédiabolisation or something to that effect, and it was used to describe what was then the Front National, now is the National Rally, where this party that was initially composed of neo-Nazis, skinheads, Holocaust deniers, all these types of characters came to prominence, and then the party kind of cleaned itself up. Now, I think the Republican Party has a much stronger history. We're not tied to these kind of lunatics that the Front National was, but at the same time, I think there are elements of our party which, perhaps they were helpful in previous years, but at this point in time, it's ridiculous to keep them. These clowns such as Alex Jones.
What do you mean, keep them or not keep them? The Republican Party doesn't have this enormous top-down power, right? No one can exile Alex Jones. He's his own character. He's a self-supporting organization, right? He's been banned from all the major social media, and he's still going. So it's kind of pointless to talk about the conservative movement or the Republican Party, exiling Alex Jones. They don't have that power.
I guess you could include Ann Coulter. I'd say Nick Fuentes as well.
Donald Trump.
I would put Trump. What?
I understand your argument, and let me respond, and then I will move on to something else. First off, the National Front, at least in my estimation, never played upon just outright schizophrenia. So I'm not really making the case of, you're a little rough around the edges. There's something almost, fun about Alex Jones when he's just kind of talking about wild conspiracy theories of the moon landing. He's a little slice of Americana, I guess you could say, to be perhaps overly fair. But, he does represent still the conservative id-brain. And, I don't...
No, it doesn't represent the conservative id-brain. It represents a manifestation of a 90 IQ conservative id-brain. Right? 120, 130 IQ conservatives are not resonating with Alex Jones.
30% of conservatives, particularly those who are motivated to vote, are highly in line with Alex Jones. And I don't know if conservatism can really go anywhere without that element to it. Okay, so Ian S.
Hey, Richard. Thanks for the resource. Honestly, I think whenever I hear you speak, it's like my IQ is increasing on the spot, actually.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to ask, maybe I'm looking too much into this, but do you think people like Alex Jones, because I largely agree with your analysis, do you think that there's a possibility that they are some sort of controlled opposition?
Man, all this talk about controlled opposition just gets boring, right? Alex Jones is so unhinged, right? He'd be the last person who'd be employed as controlled opposition.
Certainly that possibility. And also, however something began, it can end up someplace else. And so I think you could definitely make the case that Alex Jones, when he began, he was this entertaining, wild Texas radio guy. And there was nothing really suspicious about it, but I guess you kind of could go there at some point. And whenever you have a cash cow, like InfoWars became, what was revealed in these depositions and trials, this thing is pumping out hundreds of thousands of dollars a day or something. It's just incredible. Once you have something that lucrative, then, the rap.
Yeah, if you meet 95 IQ, 100 IQ Americans' need for excitement and feeling like they understand what is really going on and what's really running the world, right? There is an enormous audience for that. There are a lot more people out there with a 95 IQ than with 145 IQ. So he's meeting a need for meaning and excitement that used to be met by religion, right? If people went into Alex Jones, they'd very likely be in some low IQ form of religion, Assembly of God or something like that.
Demolishing. That's a metaphor. Like people are going to want to get a piece of that pie. There's an interesting video of Alex Jones where I think he's talking about David Icke. And David Icke is very famous. I think he used to be an athlete, and then he was a sports announcer, like a soccer or football, I guess, over in the UK announcer. And then he just kind of went off the deep end. And Alex Jones was saying that, he's a turd in the punch bowl. So basically, we're talking about the New World Order, and then this guy talks about, they're actually shape-shifting lizards, and so you can just immediately dismiss it. He's like, he was basically suggesting that he was a kind of false opposition in that case. So I think it. And then, obviously that same criticism could be applied to Alex Jones. So I think it's possible. Without evidence, I wouldn't want to make that suggestion. But I think I would, at least the way I would talk about it is in a slightly different position. And it's not so much that you want to demonize or, slander the other side. Like, let's get the most ridiculous person possible so that the other side looks bad and we win. I think the notion of the caducean, which is something that Mark Rahman has talked about, I talked about it as well. It's not so much about controlling the other side of discourse and making them look like complete ridiculous fools who should just be dismissed out of hand. It's about kind of creating a synthetic opposition. And so if you're right wing, you like Alex Jones, that means you want to slam.
But doesn't everyone create a synthetic opposition? Doesn't everyone use straw man? Isn't that just a human lazy way of dealing with your opponents in life, is to describe them in ridiculous, unfair, dishonest terms? I don't think that's something that's unique to Alex Jones.
Constitution and talk about the Bible, and you're a libertarian, and all that kind of stuff. That's what it means to be right-wing. And so I think it's that creation of a synthetic opposition. So it's like the difference of, are you a capitalist or are you a communist? Are you a Jew?
So, and part of it is that Alex Jones listeners just have a more medieval worldview, right? They see the devil, they see God, they see the sacred and the profane and the holy and the unholy. They're doing battle all around them. And so it's not just a different belief system, it's a different way of experiencing life, it's a different sense of self. So as opposed to the modern liberal notion of a self that is buffered, strategic, autonomous, basically good, capable of rationality, right? The more medieval notion of self is a human being is naturally predisposed towards evil, is porous, is vulnerable to being negatively affected by evil forces around it. There are sacred spaces and dangerous places. There are holy men and unholy men, and that we're all vulnerable to the forces of darkness and evil. Right? Alex Jones embodies this more medieval perspective on life. All conservatives are more medieval than modern liberals.
Or you were Christian. All of those binaries, that's not the whole story. That's by no means even close to representing the spectrum of opinion. And yet you create these binaries where people are like, oh yeah, I'm on Alex Jones' side. And I think Anthony Fauci is trying to kill everyone. And, there's all these kind of authentic opinions, but also opinions that are just kind of useless and stupid. I think in some ways he's part of that Caducean, but I would say the entire American right is part of that kind of Caducean opposition, where it's about synthetically creating the binary. And
well, it's creating straw men, and it's creating a sense of excitement and meaning, and a sense that you have the real stuff. You have access to what's going on with the inner party, the people who really run things. All right. I think it's about that excitement and a delusional sense that you're on the inside and that you understand what's really going on in the world. Bye-bye.